Hi guys. Tonight we step into a world of frost and foam, where the ocean breathes clouds of white mist and the deck beneath your boots feels like a frozen grave. Imagine that creaking sound beneath you, the slow moan of wood soaked in salt, stiffened by ice. A pirate ship, adrift under a bone-white moon, rocking like an old cradle. You can almost smell the brine, the faint sweetness of tar, and the sharp sting of wind slicing across your cheeks. You probably won't survive this cold if you stood here long enough, not without a drink or a blanket stolen from some unlucky merchant. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this little nighttime voyage travels. Now, dim the lights. You grip the railing and stare into a black horizon, where water and sky dissolve into one long stretch of nothing. It's winter in the North Atlantic, the kind of night when even seagulls vanish and every breath feels like a shard of glass. Yet, somewhere below deck, men are asleep. You can hear the rhythm of snoring, the shift of hammocks swaying. Pirates, in the dead of winter, finding comfort where none should exist. You duck beneath the low beams, careful not to bump your head, and the lantern light flickers gold against the damp wood. The air is thick with the smell of bodies and rope, warm in the worst possible way. You realize how fragile this piece is. Above you, the mast groans as the wind pulls at it. The ropes hum softly, like an old song. Every few seconds, you hear a soft drip melted frost sliding down the rigging, freezing again before it hits the deck. This isn't the romantic pirate story you grew up with. There's no laughter, no raucous song, just survival, and the art of making sleep happen when the world outside tries to freeze your eyelids shut. Historians still argue whether pirates endured colder voyages than royal sailors, or simply exaggerated for legend, but either way, the nights were brutal. You move deeper into the ship, stepping over a bucket half filled with ice water that had once been rain. The deck slopes slightly, just enough to make you lean to one side. Here, below the main hatch, lies the crew's quarters, a place half the size of a modern living room, yet stuffed with men, hammocks, and dreams of warmth. A single lantern swings from the beam, casting trembling shadows across the walls. You see hammocks strung like spider webs, each one cradling a pirate, curled tight. Some wrap their heads in scarves. Others cover themselves in mismatched layers, wool, leather, even sailcloth patched with stolen silk. One man mutters in his sleep, clutching a pistol as if the cold might try to rob him. Another snores softly, his breath turning to mist. Outside, frost gathers on the railings. You imagine the wind biting through thin planks, the sea air sneaking into every seam. To survive such nights, pirates turned to every trick they knew. No one lit a fire too dangerous on a wooden ship, but small oil lamps hid beneath overturned pots, giving off just enough heat to fool the mind. The scent of smoke was forbidden, but a faint trace still lingers, like a memory of warmth. You sit down near a barrel, feeling the vibration of the waves against the hull. The sound isn't loud, it's steady, like a slow heartbeat. The ocean rocks the ship, and the ship rocks you. There's something almost kind in that rhythm. Maybe that's how they manage to sleep, by surrendering to the sea's lullaby. A rat scurries past your boot, its fur puffed like a tiny winter coat. You think about how these creatures thrived even when men shivered. Some pirates kept them as unofficial company, claiming their warmth was worth the nuisance. Others believed rats brought luck, especially when they slept near them. Quirky, but it worked. Historians still argue whether these shipboard superstitions were comfort or genuine faith. Above you, the sails strain, ice cracking along their edges. The ship moves with effort, every plank complaining. Yet down here, it feels strangely safe. The flickering light softens the world, turning it into something dreamlike. You notice how pirates, despite the misery, carved out small zones of peace. A bit of rope tied as a curtain, a carved charm tucked above a hammock, a scrap of fur lining the inside of a boot, tiny rebellions against the cold. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and listen. The ocean sighs. A distant gull cries, confused to find itself awake. Someone hums a low tune, half lullaby, half prayer. You can almost feel the collective will of the crew holding the night together. Every man asleep is one less to worry, one more thread keeping the ship from unraveling. The strange thing is, in the coldest places, people sleep deepest. Perhaps it's exhaustion, or perhaps it's the body's quiet surrender to the dark. You imagine what it must have been like, the trust it took to close your eyes when death could arrive as a freezing wave or an enemy's blade. You shift, feeling the hard wood beneath you, and glance up again. The lantern light sways. The men breathe in unison. It's oddly beautiful, this fragile calm, this borrowed warmth shared among thieves and drifters. As your own eyes grow heavy, you understand something essential. These pirates didn't just survive the cold, they outsmarted it. They built warmth from stories, from rum, from each other. They made sleep an act of rebellion, a small, defiant miracle. Outside, snow begins to fall, dissolving on contact with salt water. The ship drifts forward, silent except for the whisper of sails. You imagine yourself swinging gently in one of those hammocks, the sea beneath, the stars above, the world frozen but somehow still alive. You let the thought settle, slow and soft. You descend another step into the dim belly of the ship, and the air thickens with damp wood, salt, and something that smells faintly like boiled leather. The cold here is strange, it doesn't bite so much as creep. It slinks through the cracks in the planks, slips beneath your collar, and settles between your ribs. You can almost feel the hull itself shivering. The boards beneath your feet are soaked from years of storms, and every breath releases a small ghost into the darkness. It's easy to forget that these ships were floating iceboxes in winter, built for battle and plunder, not comfort. The timbers absorbed seawater, and once frozen, they held the chill like stone. You sit near the hull and rest your hand on it. It's colder than metal, rough to the touch, and damp even here below deck. Some pirates claimed they could tell the temperature outside just by touching the walls, and maybe they were right. The sleeping quarters you stand in now would have been home to 20, maybe 30 men. No insulation, no heating, only the faint warmth of shared breath and bodies. You listen carefully and realize that sound is life here, the steady rhythm of inhalation, the shift of fabric, the whisper of the ocean outside. If you close your eyes, the noises blur together into something almost gentle. But the cold beneath the timbers is relentless. It climbs up through the floor and into their hammocks, freezing toes and stiffening joints. Some men slept with boots on, others rubbed grease on their feet, a trick they learned from fishermen in the Baltic. Whale oil, if they had it, worked best. Historians still argue whether pirates truly borrowed such methods from northern sailors or simply stumbled upon them out of desperation. Either way, it left a smell that never left the skin. You picture a man turning in his hammock, pulling his coat tighter, whispering a curse into the fabric. He's wrapped in a patchwork of stolen textiles, velvet from a Spanish merchant, linen from a captured sloop, and maybe a woolen scrap once owned by a soldier. Every thread tells a story of theft and survival. Beneath him, the planks groan as the sea presses its cold fingers against the hull. What's fascinating is how the cold reshaped behavior. Pirates weren't known for order, yet in winter, they developed quiet systems just to keep the chill at bay. Men rotated their sleeping spots so no one lay too long against the hull. The closer to the center you slept, the warmer you stayed. The unlucky ones near the edges often woke up with frost in their beards. You wonder if anyone ever traded a share of gold for a warmer corner. It wouldn't be surprising. You shift slightly and hear a faint creak, the kind that reminds you that the ship itself is alive. It bends and sighs with every wave, like it's breathing. That sound becomes the heartbeat of your night. Imagine lying here, half asleep, listening to the deep thrum of the ocean against the wood. It's hypnotic. Perhaps that's why so many pirates, even in bitter cold, claimed they slept best at sea. One pirate diary, if it's to be believed, described winter sleep as the longest hour in the shortest day. You understand what he meant. The mind stretches time differently here. When the world outside is frozen and black, dreams come easier. Or maybe they just come stranger. Sailors spoke of hearing voices in the ice, whispers from the sea calling them home. Historians still debate whether these were hallucinations from exhaustion or tales told for comfort. You tilt your head back and stare at the ceiling. Droplets hang from the beams like tiny mirrors, catching the faint light of the lantern. The air smells of salt and smoke, mixed with something sour, probably unwashed wool. You try to imagine what it would feel like to fall asleep here, wrapped in a blanket that's always damp, surrounded by the snores of men who might steal from you come morning. Oddly enough, it doesn't sound lonely. It sounds shared, like everyone aboard was equally human for those few hours of rest. The cold beneath the timbers made sleepers equal. The richest plunderer and the poorest deckhand froze the same. Maybe that's why pirates developed that strange kind of democracy historians love to mention. In the cold, hierarchy melts. When your fingers are numb and your teeth chatter, the man beside you isn't your subordinate or rival. He's another source of warmth. You take another breath, and your lungs sting slightly from the chill. You look again at the hammocks swaying softly. Each one carries its own rhythm, like waves inside the hull. Someone mumbles a prayer in another language. A faint smell of rum drifts by. Somewhere near the far wall, a candle flickers, its flame fighting the air's moisture. You can almost hear it sigh as it dies out. You crouch to touch the floor, tracing the seam where two planks meet. The gap is wide enough to let in a thin thread of light from the lantern above deck. It reminds you that just above your head, the wind is howling, trying to get in. Down here, though, it feels like another world, a fragile shelter between the storm and the sea. The cold beneath the timbers is merciless, yet it teaches patience. You realize that sleep here isn't just rest, it's resistance. Every man who manages to close his eyes and dream has won something precious from the ocean, and that victory hums quietly through the ship, invisible but real. You let your mind drift, imagining that same ship a century later, its bones still at the bottom of some dark channel, the timbers long gone, but perhaps a hammock still swinging gently, preserved by salt. Maybe, if you could listen closely enough, you'd still hear the echo of men breathing through the cold, the faintest rhythm of sleep surviving the centuries. The ship creaks again. The sound ripples up through your feet into your chest and settles there. It's oddly comforting. You think about how strange it is that a place so cold could hold such warmth in memory. And for a moment, as your eyes close against the lantern light, you understand what those men must have felt. The cold beneath the timbers wasn't the enemy. It was the test. And every night they survived it, they proved they belonged to the sea. You wake to the faint scrape of fabric against wood and the hush of the tide beyond the hull. The night is colder now, and every breath makes a pale cloud in the dark. Around you, pirates stir beneath their makeshift covers, layers of stolen cloth, patched canvas, and anything that could keep a man from freezing stiff before dawn. You run your fingers across one of those blankets. The texture surprises you. It is soft in some spots, rough in others. A history of theft stitched together by necessity. According to surviving ship logs from the late 17th century, pirates rarely owned proper bedding. When they raided merchant vessels, they took whatever looked warm: embroidered shawls, velvet curtains, even pieces of sailcloth soaked in oil for insulation. Nothing matched, yet each layer told a small story of plundered comfort. Some of these stolen textiles were absurdly luxurious. Sailors once described a corsair captain sleeping under a French tapestry worth more than his entire ship. A curious contrast: opulence wrapped around exhaustion. You can almost see it now, the gold-threaded fabric dulled by salt and grime, draped over a man with cracked hands and a frostbitten nose. A few private diaries mentioned stranger choices. One crew supposedly preferred camel hair cloaks, looted from North African merchants, claiming they stayed warm even when damp. Others swore by Spanish serge, woven thick and heavy enough to block the wind. Seafaring records from the Royal Navy confirm that wool and tightly woven flax were the only materials that could withstand months of spray and cold. It is well documented that the same types of cloth later influenced naval issue blankets. Yet among the pirates, nothing stayed clean for long. Salt hardened the fibers, and mildew crept in within days. The smell was unforgettable, sour wool, mixed with sweat and the metallic edge of the sea. A surgeon's journal recovered from a wreck near the Azores notes that sailors often rubbed their blankets with citrus peel to hide the stench. Whether that worked or simply made the quarters smell like fermented lemons, no one can say for sure. You sit back and imagine the scene. A row of hammocks swaying, each one cocooned in mismatched treasures. The men sleep like bundled relics, faces hidden beneath stolen silks. You can almost hear the gentle rustle of fabric each time the ship shifts. Somewhere in that sound is a lesson about survival through improvisation. One curious practice stands out in several old accounts. Pirates sometimes heated small stones in the galley fire when the weather permitted and wrapped them in cloth to use as crude bed warmers. The idea probably came from land-bound taverns or Scandinavian fishermen, though experts remain divided on whether this method was common or merely occasional. Imagine clutching one of those stones, the heat fading slowly, while outside the wind clawed at the rigging. As your mind wanders, you realize that even these rough blankets held value beyond warmth. They were trophies, reminders of luck and violence. Men gambled with them, traded them, even fought over them. In one record from 1703, a quarrel over a silk coverlet led to a knife fight that ended with both participants thrown overboard. It seems absurd, but when everything you owned fit inside a hammock, a blanket could feel like treasure. You touch a torn edge of cloth hanging nearby. The fibers crumble slightly between your fingers. It's easy to forget how primitive textile care was on ships like this. No washing machines, no soap that didn't sting. The crew would rinse their blankets in salt water, beat them against the deck, and hang them near the galley to dry, turning them stiff as armor. Some even soaked the fabric in animal fat to repel moisture. It helped a little, but it left everything slick and greasy. A contemporary observer once wrote that a pirate's bedding could stand upright when cold enough. You can almost laugh at the image, an army of frozen blankets leaning against the wall like ghostly sails. Still, that small absurdity paints the picture of what sleep meant here, not luxury, not softness, but a fragile truce with nature. You glance around and spot one hammock different from the rest. The fabric gleams faintly, smooth and pale. Someone, perhaps the quartermaster, has secured a piece of silk embroidered with a faded crest. You picture him crawling in at night, the fabric whispering beneath him, a stolen kingdom wrapped around tired bones. There's irony in it. A man who robs nobles now sleeps like one, only to wake in the same cramped, frozen room as his crew. Scholars today still debate how much of this was practical and how much was theatrical. Did pirates really seek luxury for warmth, or was it about pretending for a few hours that they ruled more than waves? No record can answer that. But as the lantern flickers, casting light across the jumble of cloth, it's clear that comfort was something they built out of chaos. You pull one of the blankets closer, just to feel its weight. It smells of salt and thyme. The threads scratch your skin, but the heaviness is strangely calming. You can almost understand why men risked their lives for a square of fabric that promised one night of decent sleep. Outside, the sea mutters against the hull, steady as breathing. The cold presses in, but beneath these layered spoils, the pirates sleep soundly. You watch them for a while, wrapped in their patchwork wealth, and you realize that survival here was less about strength and more about invention. In the hush of the night, surrounded by flickering light and the quiet rustle of cloth, You can almost believe that warmth itself was the greatest treasure a pirate could steal. You wake again to the hum of the ship, that endless conversation between wood and wind. The lantern above you has burned low, its glow faint and orange, painting every surface in slow-moving shadows. The air feels colder than before. You reach out instinctively toward the center of the room, half expecting to find a fire, but of course there is none. No fire could safely live here. Pirate ships were tinderboxes. One spark could erase an entire crew within seconds. The tar on the ropes, the oiled planks, the gunpowder casks stored below, all waiting for a careless flame. According to naval safety edicts from the 17th century, even royal sailors were forbidden from lighting pipes below deck, and pirates followed the same rule, though less out of discipline than survival instinct. So how did they stay warm without a hearth? You can almost feel their desperation, that aching cold that settles in the marrow. To fight it, they invented what sailors called false fire. The trick wasn't flame but illusion, warmth through imitation. They used small brass or iron pots filled with sand, heated briefly in the galley during mealtime. The sand retained its warmth for hours, especially when wrapped in canvas. Set beside a hammock, it created a gentle radiance, enough to fool the mind. Some logs from captured pirate ships mention these makeshift heaters as sleepstones or night hearts, a romantic name for a lump of smouldering sand, but perhaps it gave them hope. Occasionally, pirates borrowed methods from other cultures. North African sailors carried braziers made of perforated metal, small enough to rest on a plank. When smoldering charcoal was too dangerous, they used oil-soaked rope, letting it glow rather than burn. It filled the air with a heavy scent of smoke and salt, something halfway between incense and warning. Maritime historians today remain divided on whether this practice was truly widespread or exaggerated in travelers' tales. You crouch near one of these pots, its surface dull and dented. The warmth is subtle, not enough to stop your hands from trembling, but the gesture itself feels human. Someone cared enough to try. It's easy to forget that behind the myths of blood and plunder, pirates spent most of their time simply trying to live through the cold. There were smaller tricks too. Some sailors rubbed vinegar on metal fittings to stop ice from forming. Others hung damp clothes near barrels filled with fermenting spirits, using the mild heat from fermentation as a kind of breathing stove. Ship surgeons sometimes recommended rubbing pepper or crushed mustard on the skin to draw blood to the surface. A few letters from privateers mention wrapping themselves in sailcloth smeared with oil, sealing in body heat like a crude wetsuit. It sounds absurd, but the ingenuity is undeniable. Even without true fire, the cabin felt alive. The lantern sways softly, its reflections sliding across damp planks. The air is dense with smell spices from the galley, oil from the lamps, faint smoke drifting in from the deck above. That scent, smoky and metallic, clings to everything. You imagine it seeping into their hair, their blankets, their skin, until warmth itself smelled like danger. A sailor's diary recovered from a wreck in the Caribbean once described nights like this. The dark burns without flame. We sleep beside shadows that remember heat. The phrase lingers in your mind. It's poetic, almost too elegant for men who lived by cannon and cutlass. Still, it captures something essential about the psychology of life at sea, the idea that even pretending to be warm could keep despair away. You reach out and hover your palm above the pot. The heat pulses faintly, like a heartbeat buried under metal. Around you, the crew breathes in unison. A cough, a sigh, the creak of rope. These are the sounds that replace the crackle of fire. The ship itself becomes a furnace of rhythm and life, if not of heat. Some pirates even developed rituals around this false fire. They would gather briefly before sleep, hands cupped near the pots, sharing silence. One account from a Dutch captive recalls the men murmuring a few words in a mixture of tongues, English, Spanish, Arabic, before blowing out the lantern. It was not prayer in the usual sense, more a bargain with the night. Modern anthropologists call such acts functional superstition, ways to impose order where none exists. You sit back and watch the dim glow fade. The temperature seems to drop in sympathy. The air prickles your skin, the cold finding its way into every breath. And yet, there's a strange calm in this space. You can almost understand how the absence of fire made every scrap of heat sacred. In some ways, the pirates' ingenuity anticipated later ship designs. The ironclads of the 19th century used hot water pipes and steam channels for warmth ideas that may trace their lineage to these crude sandpots and oiled ropes. Maritime engineers acknowledge the parallel, though no one can prove direct influence. But still, it feels right. The seed of invention often hides in desperation. You lean back, your body following the slow roll of the ship. Outside, the wind wails along the rigging, the sails snap like distant thunder. Inside, you feel a warmth that has nothing to do with temperature. It's the warmth of understanding, of seeing humanity where legend usually tells only violence. The lantern flutters once and dies, plunging the room into darkness. For a heartbeat, the world seems frozen again. Then, from somewhere deep in the ship, the faint red glow of a hidden pot stirs like an ember. The pirates sleep around it, faces soft in the dim light, dreaming of fires they could never risk to make. And as the ship drifts farther into the black water, you realize that the truest warmth on this frozen voyage doesn't come from flame at all. It comes from the stubborn refusal to stop trying. You sway with the rhythm of the sea, the movement slow and deliberate, as if the world itself breathes beneath you. The creaking sound above your head is constant, but comforting, like a lullaby sung by the ship. Tonight, you are inside a revolution of rest, one that changed how sailors slept forever. The hammock is waiting, a net of woven canvas suspended from the beams. You reach out and run your hand along the rough threads. They are firm, but forgiving, smelling faintly of salt, sweat, and tar. The idea seems obvious to you now, sleeping off the ground, cradled by the air, but centuries ago this was a revelation. Records from the early 16th century credit the Taino people of the Caribbean with inventing the hammock, long before European sailors ever thought to hang beds from ropes. Spanish explorers noticed their practicality, and soon naval fleets adopted them. According to one naval account written in 1597, hammocks were the surest rest in a tempest, for they swing with the vessel and break no bones. Pirates, ever resourceful, took the concept further. Instead of stiff naval canvas, they used whatever fabric they could scavenge. Linen sails, old coats, bits of woven cargo nets. It was a system born of theft and adaptation. You can picture them testing knots, tightening lines, competing to find the perfect height. A good hammock had to sway freely but never touch the floor. The closer to the ceiling, the safer it was from rats and damp. One fascinating record from a French privateer ship describes how crewmen coated the ropes with wax to prevent fraying in winter air. It made the lines gleam like frozen veins in the lantern light. Some even lined their hammocks with thin strips of leather to stop the wind from seeping through. Maritime historians today still dispute who first introduced those small modifications, but they agree that pirates perfected the art of comfort on unstable seas. You ease yourself into one now. The motion surprises you. It feels unstable at first, as if you might flip over, but then the rhythm catches and you float. The hammock adjusts to your weight, shifting with every tilt of the ship. Your body learns to surrender, and suddenly you are no longer resisting the motion, you are part of it. This, you realize, is how pirates tricked their bodies into rest during winter storms. The hammock turned the chaos of the sea into a lullaby. Some sailors claimed the gentle rocking improved their health, easing joints and lulling the mind. In fact, modern researchers have found that swinging sleep enhances deep rest and synchronizes brain waves, something those rough men discovered by accident. The ocean had been teaching them neuroscience centuries before anyone could name it. Not every pirate took to it easily, though. Letters from captured sailors mentioned that new recruits often fell out of their hammocks on the first night, waking to laughter and bruises. Experienced hands offered tips: always sleep diagonally, never straight, or you'll roll like a fish in a net. The diagonal position kept the body balanced and allowed for better circulation. You try it now, stretching slightly, and the fabric molds around you perfectly. The hammock sways gently as the wind hums through the rigging above. You stare upward and watch the lantern's glow ripple across the planks, turning the wooden ceiling into waves of gold and shadow. For a moment, you forget you're aboard a pirate ship. You could be anywhere: a cradle, a cloud, a dream. In the silence, a faint sound rises from the next hammock. A low whistle. A sailor is breathing through his nose, lost in deep sleep. The melody he makes merges with the rhythm of the ocean. It's strangely beautiful. You close your eyes and imagine hundreds of hammocks swinging together like pendulums, each carrying a man between waking and dreaming. Pirates were known for chaos, yet their sleeping quarters moved with perfect harmony. The rows of hammocks hung at uniform distances, overlapping slightly like the scales of a fish. It was the only order the sea allowed. A visitor aboard an English ship once described the spectacle. In darkness, it seems a field of cocoons, men wrapped and swaying as if the ship itself rocks them to birth. You smile at that image. It feels accurate. Not every invention spread as far or as quickly. Some captains resisted hammocks, believing they made sailors too comfortable, too slow to wake for battle. Others worried about tangled ropes or collapsing beams. Yet by the 18th century, even navies that despised pirate customs had adopted the idea. The hammock became not just a bed but a symbol of maritime life itself. There were superstitions attached to it too. A few crews believed that cutting a man's hammock while he slept cursed his spirit to wander at sea forever. Others tied lucky trinkets or coins to the ends of their lines, hoping the weight would anchor their dreams. One anecdote from a Portuguese corsair tells of a sailor who kept a tiny wooden mermaid carved from driftwood tied above his hammock. He claimed she sang softly to calm the storms. Whether she did or not, no one dared remove her. You drift deeper into the rhythm now. The hammock creaks softly, and your breathing slows. The smell of old canvas and salt fills your nose, and your mind begins to float. There's a reason sailors swore they slept better here than in any bed on land. Out there the ground stood still, indifferent. But here, in this swaying cocoon, the sea itself tucked them in. Experts still puzzle over one last detail: how pirates managed to sleep so soundly despite the noise of waves and the fear of attack. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps the body simply learned trust through repetition. Either way, when the wind howled and frost glazed the deck, the hammock remained the safest refuge a man could have. You tighten the blanket around you and let your body match the motion. The ropes creak like an old lullaby. The cold still lingers in the air, but the hammock isolates you from it, floating between heaven and hull. As your eyelids grow heavy, you understand that for all their ferocity, pirates built something tender here, a moving cradle between danger and peace. And on the coldest nights, that gentle sway was worth more than gold. You wake to a different kind of cold this time. It clings to your skin like a damp glove, heavy and intimate. The air tastes faintly of salt and sheep's oil. Your clothes are stiff but warm, every fiber infused with grease that smells of survival. It takes a moment before you realize what you're feeling. This is lanolin, the waxy shield that kept countless sailors from freezing solid at sea. According to naval quartermaster records from the 17th century, wool was the first line of defense against winter. Not clean wool, not the kind you might wear ashore, but oily, unwashed fleece thick with lanolin. It repelled water and trapped heat, and pirates, practical as ever, made it their armor against the frost. If you rubbed your fingers along one of their shirts, you'd find it sticky and faintly shining in the lamplight. The smell never left it, a strange mixture of salt, sweat, and animal. It said that pirates rarely washed these garments. A clean shirt was a cold shirt. The grease kept them alive. Some crews even collected mutton fat from stolen cargo and melted it into a paste, rubbing it into wool coats and mittens before setting sail into northern waters. The process was messy and unpleasant, but it worked. Shipboard gossip from a captured sloop mentioned that the Frenchman stank of tallow yet feared no frost. You can almost hear the pride behind the insult. There were other layers too. Beneath the wool, thin linen, always damp but better than bare skin. Over it, coats of canvas or leather stiffened with tar. The layers trapped warmth like armor plates. Some pirates carried bits of seal, skin or fur, scavenged from Arctic traders. A curious account from a Dutch sailor tells of one man who lined his hat with rabbit pelts and claimed he never caught a chill again. Whether true or not, you can almost imagine the sight. A hardened buccaneer wrapped like a winter hunter, smiling through his beard of frost. The texture of all this fascinates you. You touch your sleeve and feel the rough weave, the oily grit that leaves a faint sheen on your fingertips. Every movement makes a quiet, rasping sound, fabric scraping against fabric. The air is close here, thick with the scent of grease and salt. It's not pleasant, but it feels safe. When the temperature drops so low that breath freezes in mid-air, smell becomes irrelevant. Warmth is all that matters. What surprises most people is how pirates manage to sleep in these heavy layers. It sounds impossible, yet there are detailed mentions of men bundling themselves like mummies, their clothes doubling as blankets. One letter from a captured privateer describes men so wrapped that no seam of flesh touched the air. It must have been stifling, but it kept their blood moving. If you loosened your collar, the cold crept in immediately, a thief that never stopped trying. A few ships experimented with different materials. Cotton was rare and nearly useless in such conditions it soaked water like a sponge. Hemp canvas, treated with wax or fish oil, became a popular outer layer instead. It squeaked when folded, and when the cold grew sharp enough, the whole garment could stand upright on its own. Some joked that their coats were more disciplined than the crew. It's easy to picture the bedtime ritual. A pirate might peel off only his boots and weapons, then curl up in his hammock, the grease-stiff wool scratching his skin. The smell of tallow and salt would fill his nose, mingling with the must of the ship. A lantern might swing nearby, glinting on metal buckles. He'd tug a rough blanket over his shoulders, shift once to find balance, and drift into sleep. The clothes themselves aged into relics. Archaeologists have recovered fragments of such garments from wrecks in the Caribbean and the North Sea. Under microscopes, the fibers still gleam faintly with the residue of lanolin. Scientists note that even centuries underwater, that natural oil resists decay. It's strange to think that what once protected flesh now preserves history. Not everyone agreed on how much fat was enough. Some crews overdid it, slathering so much grease onto their coats that they became fire hazards near lanterns. Others refused the practice entirely, preferring layers of dry wool and a strong drink of rum instead. Researchers today can't determine which method worked best, though they agree that both carried risk. Too much oil, and you risked catching a spark. Too little, and you risked freezing before dawn. You imagine yourself now lying back in that oily cocoon. The hammock presses against your shoulders, the smell of lanolin thick in your throat. The ship creaks, and the ropes sway gently. You close your eyes, and for a brief moment, you are one of them, half asleep, half frozen, but oddly content. The warmth that seeps from your body stays trapped, and the cold stays outside. Some nights, pirates rubbed their hands with a mixture of lard and ashes. A strange practice, they claimed, kept frostbite away. It worked by sealing the pores, preventing moisture from drawing out heat. The same mixture was used to polish boots, so the line between hygiene and superstition blurred constantly. A natural curiosity, really, born from trial and error rather than science. Above you, the sea moans against the hull. You can hear it, that low grinding sound of ice moving through water. The air is so cold it feels alive, yet inside this greasy armor of wool and tallow, you survive. You might even sleep. It is no wonder that sailors later joked that pirates smelled warmer than they looked. In this swaying tomb of wood and salt, warmth wasn't elegance. It was endurance. And wrapped in the lanolin-soaked embrace of wool and grease, they proved that survival could be as simple and as human as refusing to feel the cold. You can hear it before you see it, the soft clink of a cup, the dull scrape of a barrel being dragged across the floor, the pop of a cork. The air down here is colder tonight, but it carries the scent of rum, sharp and spiced, a warmth that travels faster than fire. You know what this means. It is the hour of rum dreams, that strange nightly ritual where pirates blurred the line between waking and sleep. According to naval customs recorded in the late 17th century, sailors were issued a ration of rum mixed with water, what they called grog. It kept spirits up and bodies warm, at least for a while. Pirates, unconstrained by rules, improved the formula with sugar, lime, or any spice they could steal from passing traders. Nutmeg, cinnamon, and cloves drifted through the night air like perfume. A single sip could trick the body into believing it wasn't freezing. You watch as the crew gathers in quiet clusters, their movements slow and deliberate. Each man cups his tin mug with both hands, not only to drink, but to steal warmth from the metal. The liquid glows amber in the lantern light. They don't speak loudly. The clamour of laughter that once filled daylight hours is gone. Instead, they share silence, a communion of exhaustion. One man hums a tune, another laughs softly at something only he understands. What's fascinating is how structured this small chaos became. Pirates might have rejected most authority, but when it came to rum, order reigned. The quartermaster measured each portion precisely, guarding the barrel like treasure. It wasn't just about fairness, it was survival. Too much rum before a cold night meant dehydration, which led to cramps and worse. Contemporary reports from captured ships mention crews who froze to death because they were too drunk to cover themselves. Others, though, swore that the warmth of rum saved them through the worst winters. There's something poetic in the contradiction. Rum was both salvation and curse, comfort and danger. A ship surgeon once wrote that rum warms the body but chills the reason. He wasn't wrong. You can almost feel it now. The slow, pleasant heaviness creeping through your limbs, the way sound softens and thoughts drift. It is easy to understand why pirates treated this nightly drink like a ceremony of release. A curious note in a Spanish maritime record describes how pirates sometimes flavored their rum with crushed pepper to keep themselves alert while still enjoying its warmth. It made the throat burn, and they called it fire in the belly. A few historians think the habit might have originated in the Caribbean, where indigenous recipes used chili to fight the cold at night. Others dismiss it as exaggeration, but the idea fits the pirate mind. Pain as proof of life. The lantern light flickers, and you see a man tilting his cup, letting the rum coat the sides before drinking. It shines like honey, thick and slow. The smell is sweet, almost intoxicating before it even touches your tongue. You take a sip, and the taste surprises you burning. Yes, but rounded by sugar and a hint of citrus. It feels alive. Once the mugs are empty, the room grows quieter still. The men return to their hammocks, some swaying gently as they climb in. One hums a sea shanty under his breath, the melody curling through the air like smoke. You lie back and listen, the words half lost to the creak of wood and the sigh of wind. It's strange how something so simple could knit the crew together. They had no priest, no church, no family beyond this deck, but every night they shared warmth through the ritual of drink. It dulled the aches of cold muscles and the loneliness that came from endless ocean. In a way, rum was their prayer. You tilt your head and study the faces around you. Some have already fallen asleep, mugs still in their hands. Others stare upward, eyes open but unfocused, lost somewhere between memory and dream. The cold does not seem to touch them anymore. You wonder what they dream of, perhaps gold or freedom, or maybe just a bed that doesn't move. What catches your attention most is how the rhythm of the ship seems to match their breathing. The hammock sways, the hull groans, the waves tap gently against the planks. Everything moves together, like a single, slow heartbeat. The drink has woven them into the motion of the sea itself. There are stories, of course, that after too much rum, some pirates claim to see ghosts on the deck or lights moving beneath the water. A few even said the sea whispered their names when the wind shifted. Modern psychologists might call it exhaustion mixed with mild hypothermia, but in their world, it was a sign that the ocean was listening. One peculiar story survives in an old court record from Jamaica. A captured buccaneer swore that he once dreamed, after a night of heavy grog, that the sea rose up to cradle the ship like a mother rocking her child. He said he woke with frost on his beard but warmth in his heart. No one believed him, but it's hard not to see the poetry in it. You close your eyes and take another breath. The scent of rum lingers on the air, mingled with salt and smoke. Your body feels lighter now, softer around the edges. Sleep creeps in quietly, as if on tiptoe. The ship sways, and the sound of waves merges with the low hum of the men breathing around you. Experts today note that alcohol lowers body temperature, yet still, these pirates clung to it as their nightly cure. It was an illusion, but illusions have power when the wind howls and ice forms on the ropes. The warmth they felt was fleeting, but in that moment it was enough. You let your mind drift, floating between wakefulness and dream, your stomach warm, your fingers numb. Outside, frost forms a thin sheen over the deck, turning the ship into a sculpture of glass. Inside, a few embers of warmth remain inside their mugs, inside their hearts, inside you. And as your eyes close fully, you realize that the best kind of warmth isn't the one that lasts. It's the one you remember, sip by sip, as you fall into sleep. You wake again to the low murmur of voices near the hatch. The ship rocks slowly, every movement muffled by layers of ice clinging to its sides. It is close to midnight, and the air is thick with the sound of men changing shifts. The rhythm is familiar, quiet but precise. The night watch has begun. Pirate ships, for all their reputation of chaos, lived by rules when it came to rest. The quartermaster kept the balance, deciding who slept and who stood guard. According to a surviving code from Bartholomew Roberts's crew, watches were rotated in pairs so that no man ever faced the dark alone. You can almost see them now, one holding a lantern while the other scans the horizon for lights that do not belong. The ship itself demanded this rhythm. The sea never slept, and neither could they all at once. 2 hours on, 2 hours off, sometimes 4 if the weather was merciful. This rotation shaped their lives so completely that even on land, many could not fall asleep without the creak of ropes or the smell of tar. Modern researchers studying naval diaries have noted how sailors carried that pattern for years after retirement, waking in the middle of the night as if still waiting for the next bell. Inside the sleeping quarters, those not on duty turn over in their hammocks, half aware of the movement above them. The sound of boots on the planks, the soft click of weapons being checked, the whisper of fabric, all part of the lullaby of command. You find yourself wondering how it must have felt to live on that edge between exhaustion and vigilance, where the line between waking and sleeping blurred like fog. A curious letter from a captured ship describes the quartermaster as the dream's gatekeeper. He decided who could close their eyes and who had to stay awake. In a world with no clocks, time was measured by the sound of bells, the moon's height, and the taste of fatigue. The quartermaster's duty was almost sacred, because fairness meant survival. If too many men slept, the ship was blind. If too few rested, madness set in. To keep the system working, pirates devised small tricks. A man on watch might chew coffee beans or salted lemon peel to stay alert. Others rubbed ice water on their faces or sang softly into the wind. Diaries from Dutch privateers mention sailors pinching one another awake, laughing even as their teeth chattered. It was camaraderie, born of necessity. The quartermaster himself often stayed awake longer than anyone, pacing the deck with his coat pulled tight. His eyes scanned the horizon, searching for movement. He listened for changes in the creak of the hull, a sound he knew like a heartbeat. The ocean could tell secrets to those who listened closely enough. Below deck, the rest of the crew trusted his vigilance. You picture them sleeping deeply, lulled by the security that someone else was watching. It was a fragile kind of peace, but it worked. According to one preserved account from 1702, a pirate ship could cross entire oceans with only a dozen men awake at any given time. The rotation was so precise that even storms rarely broke it. There's an elegance in the arrangement. The chaos of their day's plunder, shouting, argument gave way to this quiet order at night. The ship's heartbeat slowed, and the pirates became almost gentle. Some men whispered stories before sleep, trading tales of ports and lovers they'd never see again. Others simply turned their faces to the wooden ceiling and counted breaths until the next watch. You imagine the quartermaster's lantern sweeping across the deck, its flame dimmed to a red glow so it wouldn't blind anyone's eyes. The light moves like a heartbeat across the ship, touching faces briefly before vanishing into the dark. You can hear the soft thump of his boots, the faint rattle of his pistol belt. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His presence is reassurance enough. An English traveller once remarked that pirates sleep better than kings because their rest was earned through order, not luxury. There's truth in that. The discipline of the watch kept them alive, and it gave their dreams structure. Some modern historians have argued that this nightly rhythm, more than their codes or flags, was what made pirate communities function as long as they did. Without shared rest, no ship could survive a winter sea. The wind outside rises for a moment, shaking the masts. You hear a man above shout something in a language you don't know, and the quartermaster answers with calm authority. The sound fades quickly, swallowed by the night. The ship steadies again. Below, the men sleep on. One shifts in his hammock, another mumbles in his dreams. Perhaps he dreams of land, or perhaps he dreams of the sea watching him back. You pull your own blanket tighter and think about the trust that fills this small space, the kind of trust that allows a man to sleep knowing that another stands guard. Some say that the quartermaster's fairness was what kept pirate ships more democratic than many kingdoms on land. Every man knew he would have his turn at both exhaustion and rest. It was equality measured in hours and stars. You close your eyes and listen to the rhythm of the bells above, marking the passing of another watch. The sound is soft but certain, the kind of sound that tells you time is still moving even when the world feels frozen. And as you drift towards sleep, you realize that this quiet system of shifts, this unspoken pact between the waking and the dreaming, was the heartbeat of the pirate life. They conquered the cold not with comfort but with rhythm, fairness, and faith in one another. You lie awake for a moment longer, eyes open to the faint shimmer of light leaking through the cracks above. The air smells of damp rope and wax, the kind of scent that settles into every breath until it feels natural. Around you, the ship has fallen silent again. The night watch has taken their posts, and those below deck have slipped into uneasy sleep. But not all sleep is peaceful here. There is a rule in this floating world, one not written in any code. Silence must be respected, or tempers ignite faster than gunpowder. Life at sea made every small sound sharper. A cough, a footstep, even the creak of someone turning over could snap nerves stretched thin by cold and exhaustion. Some ships, according to letters kept in maritime archives, enforced quiet through unwritten threats. A man who snored too loudly might find his hammock cut or his blanket soaked by pranksters seeking revenge. It sounds cruel, but noise at night meant lost rest, and lost rest meant mistakes during storms or battle. You close your eyes and try to imagine it. Dozens of men packed shoulder to shoulder in a space no larger than a tavern cellar, each trying to pretend they are alone. The only sounds are the waves pressing against the hull, the occasional sigh, the steady rhythm of breathing. That fragile quiet is their shared lifeline. The silence had its language. A cough could mean cold. A whisper might signal a nightmare. When someone's breathing changed suddenly, others noticed. Even half asleep, they listened for patterns, the same way they read the sea or the wind. In a world without clocks, time was measured by sound. The steady rise and fall of sleep told them that the night was still alive. There are curious stories about how seriously pirates took this code of rest. One old sailor's memoir from the 1720 seconds describes a man who snored like a drum. The crew tied a small pebble in a cloth and placed it under his chin so that if he started snoring, the weight would wake him. It worked, though the man claimed he dreamt of being stoned by ghosts. Another account mentions a ship where the cook forbade talking after midnight, claiming the sea itself listened and grew jealous of human voices. Folklore, perhaps, but even superstition can be a kind of law. Historians studying life aboard pirate ships often remark that rest was a form of currency. A good night's sleep could buy patience, courage, even mercy. Without it, chaos brewed. There are court records describing mutinies that began with something as small as an argument over noise. When men live so closely, privacy becomes imaginary, and silence becomes sacred. You shift slightly in your hammock and feel the wood creak beneath you. The sound seems too loud in the stillness, and for a moment you hold your breath, as if afraid to disturb the spell. It's strange how quickly the body learns reverence when surrounded by others who crave quiet. There is an almost religious rhythm to the night. The watch changes, the lantern light sways, the hammocks drift. Yet beneath that calm lies tension, the kind of energy that hums under your skin when everyone pretends to sleep. You wonder what thoughts kept them awake: guilt, fear, hope, or just the ache in their bones from the endless cold. Some scholars have suggested that pirates' devotion to silence came not only from practicality, but also from superstition. They believed noise could wake the spirits of the dead, especially after a battle. A few wrecks reveal charms carved into beams or small tokens buried under the floorboards, meant to appease restless souls. Whether these were genuine rituals or simply habit, no one can say for certain. Still, the idea lingers. You imagine a ship adrift in the Black Sea, full of sleeping men and sleeping ghosts, both kept calm by the same fragile hush. The cold amplifies every creak until it sounds like whispering. Perhaps that is why sailors so often spoke to the ship as if it were alive, because in the quiet it answered. A peculiar anecdote from a Danish logbook tells of a pirate who carried a small seashell in his pocket. Before sleep, he would hold it to his ear and listen. He claimed the ocean spoke through it, promising another dawn. His crewmates laughed, but when he was killed in a storm, they nailed the shell to the mast for luck. Such small rituals helped them preserve peace in a world where peace rarely lasted. You lie back and let the silence settle again. Your ears grow sensitive, picking out every sound: the rope's faint groan, the slow drip of melting frost, the heartbeat of the ship itself. The noise becomes hypnotic. It's almost as if the sea has decided to breathe through the wood, a slow pulse that keeps the world turning. The absence of chatter gives your mind room to wander. You think about how these men, feared by nations, were bound by something so gentle a rule that said, "Let others rest." For all their violence, they understood that rest kept them human. Outside, a gust of wind rattles the mast, but no one stirs. The code of quiet holds. You feel the hammock sway, a small motion that makes you drowsy again. The air around you hums faintly, like the sound inside a seashell. As your thoughts drift, you realize that silence itself might be the truest treasure of this ship. It was the one thing they could not steal but had to earn together, night after night, breath by breath. And as your eyes close, the hush of the ocean wraps around you like a second blanket. The ship rocks gently, the cold waits outside, and the silence remains soft, watchful, eternal. You wake to a softer world. The wind outside has eased, and the deck above you sighs like a living creature finally exhaling. The night is still dark, but there is a strange comfort in the constant rhythm of the waves. You can hear them brushing against the hull, rising and falling with a steady cadence. The sound fills every corner of the ship, wrapping itself around you like a lullaby carved from the sea. It is easy to forget in this frozen air that noise can soothe instead of frighten. Many sailors wrote that they could not sleep on land because silence felt unnatural. The ocean had trained their bodies to rest only with motion and sound. A ship that creaked and sang was alive, safe and steady. A ship that went silent was one in trouble. According to logbooks from both naval and pirate vessels, men grew anxious when the sea was calm, fearing that quiet water meant an approaching storm. You listen more closely. The ship's timbers groan softly, expanding and contracting as cold water seeps through their seams. Above, ropes slap lazily against the mast. It is a kind of music one composed of friction and patience. You can almost see the waves through sound alone. Long silver arcs, glittering faintly in the moonlight, curling and collapsing like whispers made visible. Some sailors gave names to these sounds. They called the low hum along the hull, the whale's song, and the sharper crack of rigging the wind's tongue. It was their way of making sense of the chaos. Every creak was a message, every crash of foam, a reminder that the world was still moving. Maritime journals from the 17th century often describe how these sounds lulled men to sleep faster than any song. Modern sleep researchers would later confirm what those sailors already knew, that rhythm and repetition calm the brain, slowing the heartbeat until dreams take over. You turn your head toward the sound and feel your pulse matching it. The ocean beats beneath you like a great slow drum. For a moment, the world feels perfectly timed. You realize how rare that kind of harmony must have been in a life filled with danger. Perhaps this is why pirates loved their ships like they did. The vessel wasn't just transport or shelter. It was a companion that breathed and spoke in rhythm with them. One curious account from a merchant prisoner tells of a pirate who claimed to know when to sleep by the pitch of the waves. "When the sea hums low," he said, "she is singing us to dream." The prisoner mocked him in his report, yet the idea lingers because it feels true. You can hear that same hum now, deep and steady, echoing through the wooden ribs of the hull. There were nights when storms drowned out everything, when thunder swallowed song and men clung to their hammocks like prayer beads. But on calm winter nights like this one, the sea was tender. The surface gleamed with frost, the air thick with salt mist, and the sound of waves brushing the hull felt like a mother's hand smoothing a child's hair. Even the cold seemed gentler when it moved with music. It's remarkable how the human mind finds comfort in repetition. The pirates must have felt it too, the hypnosis of rhythm. When the same motion rocks your body for weeks on end, sleep becomes a surrender rather than a choice. It is said that some sailors could sleep through cannon fire but woke instantly when the sea grew still. The silence meant danger, noise meant safety. The sound of the sea was their guardian. You close your eyes, and the rhythm deepens. The waves strike in slow, measured intervals, almost like breathing. Between them, you can hear faint drips of condensation falling from the beams, tiny metronomes keeping time. There is a pulse in everything, in the sea, in the wood, in you. The sound has weight. It feels ancient, older than the ship, older than language itself. A traveler once wrote that sailors dream in rhythm, their souls swaying with the tide. You think about that now and realize how deeply the sea reshaped their inner worlds. Each sound became part of their memory, their comfort, even their identity. To sleep on land, away from the music of the waves, must have felt like being deaf to one's own heartbeat. As the minutes pass, the sound begins to change. The waves grow slower, the ship steadier. It's as if the ocean, too, is drifting towards sleep. You imagine the crew above you, bundled in cloaks, leaning against the rails while frost settles on their sleeves. Their eyes might close for just a moment, trusting the sea to rock them awake if danger comes. One scholar once observed that sailors lived inside the lungs of the world, breathing with the tide. That image feels right now. You inhale, and the air tastes of salt and wood smoke. You exhale, and the sound of the sea answers. You are no longer separate from it. Outside, a pale glow begins to rise. Maybe moonlight breaking through the clouds or dawn creeping up unnoticed. The water glimmers like glass. The ship moves slower still, rocking so gently you can't tell where the motion ends. The sound of the sea, constant yet never the same, carries you towards sleep as if it has always known the way. You take one last deep breath. The air is cold, clean, alive. The sound of the sea fills your ears, soft as a secret, and everything else fades. The ship rocks once more, then settles into perfect rhythm. And in that rhythm, you finally let go, trusting the ocean to sing you through the night. The cold has grown sharper. You feel it in your fingers when you pull the blanket tighter, in your breath as mist drifts upward toward the ceiling. The lantern light flickers weakly, stretching shadows along the curved walls. Tonight the sea is quiet, but the air inside feels heavy, thick with the scent of sweat and salt. Around you, the pirates have begun their nightly preparations for rest, and you notice something curious. Some sleep fully clothed, even with their boots and belts on. Others strip almost bare, their skin pale against the dim light. Each man swears his way is the only way to survive the cold. Naval logs from the late 17th century confirm that sailors were divided on this matter. Some believed sleeping clothes trapped the day's moisture, making them colder by dawn. Others argued that layers of fabric kept the chill from reaching the bone. There was no science to guide them, only habit and superstition. The arguments could last hours, muttered across hammocks as men tested their courage against the winter air. You watch one pirate, his hair braided with beads, carefully removing his coat before crawling into his hammock. He folds it beneath him to serve as a barrier against the draft. Another man, thick-bearded and stubborn, laughs and tucks his pistol into his belt before settling down, still wearing his wool coat. The first believes warmth comes from air trapped around the skin. The second believes warmth comes from refusing to expose the body at all. Both fall asleep quickly, as if confident the sea will prove them right. A record from an English privateer describes a similar scene. Half of us slept as though the world were frozen solid, the rest naked, as if we were back in the Indies. The author concluded that neither group was wrong, only accustomed to its own comfort. Sailors came from every corner of the world, and each brought with him a different philosophy of sleep. Some rubbed oil on their chests to seal the body's heat. Others dusted themselves with flour to stay dry. It is strange to imagine a man powdered like bread dough before bed, yet such methods were genuinely practiced, especially among northern crews. There were more superstitions than logic. A few believed that sleeping unclothed let the body breathe with the sea, a phrase recorded in a Portuguese logbook. Another crew feared that removing clothes invited spirits to rest beside them, drawn by exposed flesh. Scholars who study maritime folklore still discuss whether these beliefs were rooted in religion, practicality, or simple madness born of isolation. You touch the edge of your own sleeve, wondering which rule you'd follow. The air is so cold that your breath feels sharp, yet when you loosen your collar, the skin beneath prickles with warmth. Perhaps both sides are right. Perhaps survival was less about method and more about confidence, the belief that your way would see you through the night. Some pirates slept in their armor during tense voyages. A few diaries describe captains insisting that men remain dressed in case of sudden attack. Imagine waking from sleep to the shout of an approaching ship, stumbling across the deck with frozen fingers still trying to fasten buttons. Those who slept in armor were ready, but they paid for it with aching muscles and shallow rest. Their dreams must have felt like battles too. Others risked vulnerability for the sake of comfort. A Spanish record from a captured sloop tells of sailors who slept, stripped to their waists, wrapping themselves in stolen blankets embroidered with golden thread. Their reasoning was simple. The rich slept bare, and if the rich could afford it, so could they. You can almost hear the laughter behind that defiance. It was not science, but pride that kept them warm. The air inside the cabin carries the faint scent of oil and wool. You can hear the rhythmic sound of breathing, slow and deep. Each man has made his choice, his private pact with the cold. One pirate near the door mutters a prayer in a language you do not recognize, fingers tracing a charm made of bone. Perhaps he is asking forgiveness for the life he has lived, or simply asking the wind to stay outside tonight. You lie still, feeling the wood vibrate faintly beneath you. The temperature shifts with every gust, the cold slipping through seams in the planks. Your own body begins to adjust, your mind quieting until you can hear the smallest sounds: a sigh, a rope shifting, the creak of leather. Sleep here is not comfort, it is surrender, a negotiation between body and world. Modern historians often note that these nightly rituals reveal more about human endurance than about piracy itself. They show how belief, habit, and necessity intertwined in the smallest acts. Whether a man slept clothed or bare, whether he trusted science or superstition, he was still just a creature trying to stay alive on a frozen sea. The lantern light dims further. A faint halo of smoke rises from the wick, painting the ceiling in trembling gold. You glance again at the two men beside you, one wrapped like a soldier in his wool, the other bare-chested under a stolen silk sheet. Both breathe steadily, the difference between them erased by exhaustion. The ship sways gently, and you close your eyes. The cold brushes against your face like an invisible hand, but the hammock moves with the rhythm of the tide, and warmth blooms slowly from within. You realize that sleep here has nothing to do with comfort. It is an act of faith, a silent agreement with the sea that she will let you wake again. And as the world narrows into darkness, that faith feels enough. Whether dressed in wool or nothing at all, every man aboard drifts together into the same dream, warmed by courage, exhaustion, and the endless sound of water moving through the night. The night is long, and the cold deepens until even the boards beneath your hammock seem to hum with frost. Around you, the crew sleeps fitfully. Some shift in their hammocks, muttering words that belong to no language you know. The air feels alive with the weight of their dreams. Pirates, hardened by salt and battle, still carried a strange tenderness into sleep, a belief that the sea spoke to them in visions. A few scattered journals from the 18th century record their superstitions about dreams. One sailor wrote that when you dream of calm water, fortune follows, but when you dream of black waves, a storm is already on its way. Another claimed that dreaming of a white gull meant a letter from home, though few had homes left to write. It is curious how even men who trusted no God still trusted their dreams. You turn your head toward the faint light of a lantern swinging from a beam. Shadows ripple across the walls like moving water. The ship seems to breathe in its sleep, rising and falling with the waves. In that motion, it is easy to believe that the dreams of the men below are carried upward, mingling with the wind above. Stories of prophetic dreams were common among sailors. A record kept by a captured merchant mentions a pirate who dreamed of a sea serpent circling the ship. The next day, the crew found the hull leaking near the bow, shaped eerily like a coiled snake. They repaired it in silence and toasted the dreamer that night. Another account describes a man who swore he saw his dead brother standing on the waves, beckoning him home. He deserted at the next port and was never heard from again. Such stories wove themselves into the fabric of shipboard life, until even the skeptics listened closely to the tales told at dawn. What makes it fascinating is how those dreams blurred faith and fear. Many pirates carried charms around their necks, small bones, shells, or bits of coral, believing they guarded sleep from the spirits of the drowned. Some sang softly before resting, not for company but to warn ghosts to stay away. Ethnographers who study maritime culture have found similar habits among fishermen from every ocean, each convinced that the sea watches what its children dream. You can almost feel that presence now, the vastness pressing against the wooden walls like a listening ear. The ship creaks softly, and for a moment you think you hear a voice. It is not human, only the sea rubbing against the hull, yet it carries rhythm, a whispering pulse that makes your skin prickle. Maybe this is what the old sailors meant when they said the sea remembers. One curious letter from a French privateer describes a night when the crew refused to sleep at all. A man had dreamed of water pouring into the hold, and though they mocked him at first, unease spread quickly. By morning, they were still awake, waiting for proof of doom that never came. The captain finally forced them to rest, threatening to toss anyone who spoke of dreams again. Yet that same week, a storm cracked their mainmast clean in two. No one laughed after that. You breathe slowly, feeling the damp chill settle on your face. The hammocks sway in quiet unison, and the men seem at peace, though their brows twitch and their lips move silently. What would they dream of tonight? Gold piled high? Fire from cannons? Or perhaps something gentler, a tavern, a lover, a warm bed that doesn't move. For men who lived by the sword, even tenderness found its way into dreams. Modern scholars suggest that the harsh rhythm of sea life shaped the mind in strange ways. The constant rocking, the lack of light, and the endless repetition of tasks blurred the boundary between waking and sleeping. Some sailors spoke of sea dreams, a trance that could come even while standing at the helm. You can imagine it now, that half-conscious drift where the body works and the mind floats elsewhere, still listening to the tide. Among pirates, dreams were also tools for storytelling. In the hours before dawn, they would whisper their visions to one another, weaving prophecy into entertainment. A man might claim he dreamed of a buried chest glowing with fireflies. Another would insist he dreamed of a mermaid whispering his name. Such tales became omens, jokes, or excuses for bold plans. To dismiss a dream outright was considered unlucky. There is one last detail preserved in a rare court testimony. A pirate accused of mutiny claimed he acted under the command of a dream. He said the sea itself had told him to take control of the ship, promising calm waters if he did. The judges laughed, but the record shows he spoke without fear, as though he truly believed it. No one can say whether he was mad or merely devoted to his myth. You shift in your hammock, the motion gentle as breath. The air feels colder near the floor, warmer near your chest. The sounds of the ship blur together again, the groan of timber, the distant hiss of waves, the faint hum of sleeping men. It is easy to see how such sounds could become voices in a dream, how the sea might whisper to anyone willing to listen. The lantern above flickers, its flame bending sideways before righting itself. You stare at it until your eyes grow heavy. Somewhere deep inside, a familiar calm begins to rise, the kind that comes just before sleep takes hold. If you dream tonight, perhaps you too will see what they saw. The ocean shimmering beneath stars, a horizon so wide it feels endless, a whisper from the deep that says you belong to it. And as your body drifts toward rest, the sea keeps speaking, in creaks and sighs and soft ripples, telling its stories to those brave enough to fall asleep on its back. The ship tilts slightly with the weight of a wave, and you wake to the sound of someone quietly humming. It is not a song you know. The melody rises and falls in a rhythm as slow as breathing, each note softened by distance. The lantern light trembles. The air feels colder than ever, yet something warm lingers here, an invisible gentleness passed from one man to another. You turn your head and see a pair of pirates sitting side by side beneath the low beams. One wraps his cloak around the other's shoulders. They do not speak. Words are unnecessary when the air itself freezes between syllables. The gesture is simple, but it feels monumental, like defiance against the cold. Many written accounts from the 17th century note that companionship was the only true comfort available to sailors. Pirates, despite their reputation, lived by the warmth of shared humanity. They took care of one another when the world outside seemed determined to forget them. According to the log of a captured frigate, men often shared coats, blankets, or even body heat when the temperature fell below freezing. The chronicler called it the mercy of thieves. You watch as another man, barely awake, passes a tin mug to his neighbor. Inside is a few mouthfuls of warm grog, its steam rising faintly like a ghost. The man who receives it nods without a word, drinks, and sinks back into his hammock. A small kindness given in silence, but you can feel its weight. These gestures stitched the crew together far more tightly than any flag or oath. Historians still puzzle over how pirate societies held such loyalty despite being built from outcasts. Some attribute it to shared hardship. Others suggest that the endless danger of sea life stripped away pretense until only instinctive compassion remained. Perhaps the cold itself was the teacher. When every breath turned to frost, no one could afford selfishness for long. You close your eyes for a moment, and in that half-darkness you begin to hear other sounds: soft laughter, a whispered joke, a faint snore from somewhere near the bow. These are not the noises of a disciplined army, but of a family improvising its survival. It is oddly comforting. The ship might be frozen from mast to keel, but within its wooden heart, warmth flickers quietly from person to person. There are recorded stories of pirates who gave up their own blankets to cover injured crewmates. One Spanish prisoner wrote that during a cold snap in the Bay of Biscay, a wounded man was placed between two healthy ones at night to keep him alive. He survived, though the others woke shivering. No one spoke of it, but everyone remembered. Acts like that rarely reached history books, yet they defined the rhythm of their nights. Even the music you hear now has a purpose. A quiet song, passed from mouth to mouth, helps regulate breath in the freezing air. The lyrics are likely nonsense, a mix of words from many ports, but the sound binds them together. Some anthropologists believe sailors instinctively use song to pace their breathing and share warmth, much like animals huddled in rhythm to conserve energy. You hum along softly, almost without realizing it. The tone vibrates in your chest, faint but real. The sound merges with the low creak of the ship and the whisper of waves outside. It feels like a conversation between the living and the sea. In the half-light, you notice another scene. A young sailor, no older than 18, sits carving something from wood. His hands shake slightly from the cold. When he finishes, he passes the small object, a charm in the shape of a bird, to an older man who smiles tiredly. It is a gift of gratitude for a borrowed coat, perhaps, or simply a reminder that kindness can survive even here. Accounts from several wrecks mention such small tokens found among the ruins: carved shells, cloth scraps tied in knots, initials etched into spoons. Archaeologists call them marks of presence. They were the only ways pirates could make their existence tangible in a world where everything they owned might sink without warning. These tokens were exchanged like promises, sometimes even placed in hammocks beside the dead before burial at sea. You stretch your legs beneath the blanket and feel the faint heat where someone's hand brushed against yours earlier. It lingers longer than it should. The cold loses its bite for a moment, replaced by something gentler. The warmth of another person, even if accidental, feels like a rebellion against the night. A curious letter written by a sailor's widow mentions that her husband once described sleeping with the heart of the ship. She thought he meant the sound of the waves. But reading it now, you understand he probably meant this: the companionship of men breathing together, keeping one another alive through the longest hours. You glance toward the door where the faintest draught enters, curling smoke from the lantern. The two men beneath it have stopped humming. One has fallen asleep on the other's shoulder. The older of the two adjusts the blanket again, careful not to wake him. The ship rocks, and they sway together as if moving to an invisible rhythm. This quiet tenderness feels out of place in the legends of violence that surround them, yet it is truer than those stories. Pirates could be cruel, but in the cold, cruelty had no use. Only cooperation could beat the frost. As you close your eyes again, the scene settles in your mind: hammocks swaying like gentle tides, the scent of salt and grog, the low murmur of men breathing warmth into one another's dreams. The cold has not gone away, but it has been tamed, softened by human touch. And for a brief, perfect moment, the ship feels less like a vessel of thieves and more like a shared heartbeat, keeping time against the endless winter sea. The world outside is silent now, except for the grinding hiss of ice against the hull. You open your eyes to the dim grey of morning that never truly arrives, the kind of half-light that belongs only to winter at sea. The ship groans softly beneath its frozen skin. You can feel it in the wood, the strain of cold pressing from every side. The ropes above your head look stiff as iron, their fibers white with frost. You sit up slowly. The air stings your face, dry and sharp. Breath leaves your mouth like smoke. Somewhere above deck, a man coughs, the sound echoing through the planks. The night has passed, but warmth has not returned. According to logs from early 18th century voyages, even experienced sailors dreaded nights when the rigging froze. The ropes that once sang with the wind became unyielding rods of ice. Sails stiffened, pulleys jammed, and the smallest movement could send shards falling like glass. Crews worked through the dark to strike sails before they shattered, moving with bare hands that bled from contact with the frozen hemp. You climb to the edge of the hatch and peek upward. The deck glows faintly in the light of a pale moon. Frost clings to everything, rails, barrels, even the men standing guard. They move carefully, their boots crunching softly, their breath rising in slow white spirals. The sea itself looks strange, not liquid but slushy, thick waves edged with ice crystals. Every sound is muted, as if the world is wrapped in glass. A journal from a shipwreck survivor once described this sight as a world made of knives. He wrote that the sound of frozen sails snapping in the wind was like cannon fire. You can almost hear it now, the sudden cracks that split the air, each one followed by the groan of the mast. Those who survived such nights remembered them for the rest of their lives. Below deck, the men do what they can to prepare. The cook keeps a small kettle of water near the lantern to warm fingers when they return. The smell of salt meat and tea fills the narrow space, oddly comforting in its simplicity. One pirate sits sharpening a blade, though it is more habit than need. Another mutters to himself as he patches a glove with stolen thread. Their faces are pale, but their eyes stay calm. The sea has already taught them not to fight the cold, only to work around it. A curious entry in a French naval log describes how pirates used their hammocks as insulation when the rigging froze. They lined the beams above with cloth, trapping what little warmth rose from the lamps. It worked, if only slightly. You look up and see the same trick here. Blankets hung like heavy curtains, edges stiff with frost. Every small idea becomes a defense. You can hear the quartermaster's voice above, steady and low, giving orders. No one shouts in this cold. Sound itself feels fragile. The men move with discipline, cutting ice from ropes and adjusting sails that no longer bend. Their fingers are red and raw. Someone slips, curses softly, and keeps working. What amazes you is the calm. These pirates, famed for chaos, face nature's fury with the patience of monks. One historian suggested that the sea's brutality forged discipline better than any captain could. Another claimed it was the quiet understanding of mortality that kept them steady. In moments like this, pride fades. Survival requires cooperation, and arrogance freezes faster than water. You watch as the frost thickens along the beams, spreading like lace. Each thread of ice catches the lamplight, glowing faintly gold. It is beautiful and cruel all at once. The ship feels smaller now, trapped in a cage of its own making. Yet within that confinement, there is a strange intimacy. Everyone aboard breathes in rhythm, moving as one body through the frozen dark. A sudden gust shakes the hull. Snow slips from the rigging and scatters like ash. For a moment, you imagine you are adrift inside a snow globe, sealed away from the world. The sound of the wind deepens, and the ship leans hard to one side before slowly righting itself. The hammocks swing in unison, and a few men groan in their sleep. None wake fully. They have learned that fear wastes warmth. You think of how fragile the ship must have felt to them, just planks and nails separating skin from the abyss. And yet they trusted it completely, calling it by name, repairing it with the care one gives a living creature. To a pirate, the ship was not wood, it was memory, protection, and home. The cold continues to press inward. Your fingers ache as you pull your coat tighter. The lantern's flame sputters, threatened by lack of air. You cup your hands near it, and the tiny heat stings your skin. Above, a bell rings twice. A change of watch. The sound carries through the frozen beams like a heartbeat. As you listen, something inside you softens. The world is still brutal, but the sound of that bell feels human, familiar, grounding. It tells you that even in this ice-laden silence, life continues, measured not in minutes but in courage. You settle back into your hammock and feel it sway. The sea groans below, restless but restrained. Somewhere in the dark, a man hums again, the same wordless tune you heard before. It echoes gently, blending with the ship's creaks and the faint hiss of wind. The noise becomes a fragile lullaby, sung against the cold. And so, surrounded by ice and courage, you close your eyes. The rigging above you crackles softly, but you are no longer afraid of the sound. It is the sea breathing through the ship, testing, warning, promising. You take one slow breath, and for the briefest moment, the frost seems to shimmer like stars caught in the ropes. The ship rocks once more, and everything fades into the rhythm of survival. The night stretches on, long and glassy, and you wake to the sound of something moving nearby. It is soft and quick, followed by a faint purr that ripples through the cold air. You open your eyes and find a cat balanced on a beam, its fur puffed against the frost. It looks down at you with eyes like molten copper, then leaps lightly into a hammock beside a sleeping sailor. The man grunts, shifts, and lets the animal curl against his chest. For a moment, the world feels almost tender. Cats were common on ships of every flag. Maritime records from the 17th century mention them as essential passengers. They hunted rats, protected grain stores, and served as living good luck charms. But on pirate ships, they carried an even deeper meaning. Many sailors believed cats could sense weather before it came, their moods turning restless before a storm. Some swore that when a cat slept near a man, it meant the sea favored him that night. You watch this one now, tail twitching, and almost believe the stories. The cold bites harder here, yet warmth clings stubbornly to life. The same sailor who cradles the cat shifts again, pulling his coat tighter around both of them. Nearby, another man stirs, muttering affectionately to a monkey sitting at the foot of his hammock. The small creature hides its face in the man's scarf, trembling slightly. These animals, strange companions for thieves, brought comfort where none should have existed. A curious account from a Dutch trading ship mentions pirates who carried parrots, monkeys, and even small dogs as mascots. Some were spoils of plunder, others simply strays that found their way aboard. In cold seasons, the animals became more than entertainment. They became living blankets, pressed close to human skin for warmth. The relationship was mutual. The animals survived, and the pirates found solace in their company. You can almost imagine the quiet laughter that must have filled these quarters at dusk, when a cat chased its tail along the floor or a monkey stole scraps from the galley. On nights like this one, though, the laughter fades to breathing. Every creature aboard, man or beast, breathes together to keep the cold away. There is an old superstition noted in maritime folklore. A cat leaving the ship meant bad luck, while one who stayed near sleeping men protected them from nightmares. Sailors tied ribbons around their cats' necks, charms to keep them close. Some even shared their rum with the animals, letting them lick a few drops for courage. To outsiders, it might have looked foolish. But when the ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, a small heartbeat beside you could feel like proof that the world was still kind. You look again at the cat on the beam. Its fur glows faintly in the light of the lantern, whiskers catching the shine. When it stretches, its paws leave tiny prints of warmth on the frost. The sight makes you smile. Here, amid salt, damp, and danger, such small grace feels miraculous. A sailor once wrote in his diary that he had a dream about his ship's cat guiding him home. The next morning, land appeared on the horizon. He kept a tuft of the cat's fur in a pouch until the day he died. Whether the story is true or not hardly matters. The human heart clings to symbols when the world feels endless and cold. The monkey on the other hammock suddenly chatters softly, waking its owner. The man laughs quietly and rubs its head. You can see the affection in his tired smile. Pirates are remembered for violence, yet here in the dark, their gentleness tells another story. They lived closer to death than most, and perhaps that made them softer in small, hidden ways. Researchers who study maritime life suggest that these bonds between sailors and animals served psychological needs long before anyone understood such terms. The companionship eased fear, and the act of caring gave meaning to lives otherwise ruled by chance. In the bleakest winters, even feeding a pet became an act of hope. The air grows colder again, and frost spreads across the ceiling beams. The cat lifts its head, ears flicking, as if it hears something beyond your perception. It meows once, softly, then curls up tighter. The monkey, too, settles back into its hammock, wrapping its tail around the man's wrist like a rope. For a moment, the entire cabin seems to hold its breath. Outside, the sea moves under a crust of ice. The ship rocks gently, slower than before. You hear a faint scratching sound, perhaps another rat, perhaps the wind clawing at the boards. Either way, the animals stay calm, their instincts unbothered. That calm spreads through the room like a quiet blessing. You let your eyes close again. The sound of purring blends with the hum of the ship, steady and soft. You realize that warmth is not always born from fire. Sometimes it lives in small hearts, in fur against skin, in the soft companionship that needs no words. One final note from an old sailor's diary comes to mind. We feared the storms and trusted the cats. You understand now why. In a world of cold steel and salt, a little creature's warmth might be the truest treasure of all. As the lantern light fades, the purr continues, rhythmic and sure. The ship drifts onward through the frozen dark, carrying its sleeping men and their unlikely guardians through another night at sea. You wake to the murmur of voices in the half-light before dawn. The cold is biting, and your breath leaves small clouds above your face. Two men whisper near the corner of the cabin, their heads close together over something spread out on a wooden crate. The faint flicker of the lantern glows against their faces. It takes you a moment to realize what you are seeing. They are tracing the outline of a map. The parchment looks old, edges curled, stained with salt and oil. It glows like parchment stolen from another world, its ink faded to sepia. The men lean close, careful not to wake the others. Their whispers slide through the still air, punctuated by quiet laughter and the occasional sigh of disbelief. You can almost hear the rustle of dreams being plotted. Bedtime stories on a pirate ship were not lullabies but tales of treasure. Maps, both real and imagined, drifted from hand to hand like sacred relics. Historians have found fragments of such charts in museum collections, scrawled on animal hide, sailcloth, and even scraps of prayer books. They were as much fantasy as navigation. The lines rarely matched any real coast, yet they gave exhausted men something worth believing in. You inch closer, and the faint scent of rum and candle wax fills your nose. One of the pirates taps the map with a scarred finger. His companion grins and mutters, "Tomorrow we're rich." You doubt they truly believe it. But in the middle of a frozen ocean, even a lie that warms the heart is worth keeping alive. Maritime records mention that pirates often told these stories before sleep, not for greed but for comfort. They shared legends of islands where the sand glittered like gold dust, or caverns where jewels grew from stone like fruit. Sometimes the maps were drawn just for fun, sketched by firelight with bits of charcoal. One man would invent an island, another would swear he had seen it. Soon the whole crew would argue about it as if they had all been there. It was a game, but also a ritual. To dream of treasure was to dream of tomorrow. On nights when the wind howled and frost gathered on the ropes, it reminded them why they endured. A curious journal from a British naval officer, captured by pirates, describes such a scene. He wrote that they spoke of gold with the tenderness of poets, as if each coin held the warmth they had lost to the sea. You smile at the thought. There is truth in that. To a man freezing in a hammock, treasure was not wealth, but sunlight remembered. You watch as the two men fold the map carefully and hide it beneath a blanket. One stretches and lies back, pulling his coat tight. The other lingers, eyes half closed, still smiling. Perhaps he is already dreaming of the island they just invented. It is strange how stories grow in places where light is scarce. A few centuries later, scholars would argue about whether most pirate maps ever existed at all. Some call them myths, born from sailors' boredom. Others suggest they were coded guides used by smugglers. The debate continues, but the idea itself has outlived the evidence. Maybe that is the point. You lie back and stare at the ceiling. The wood above you glows faintly in the weak light. The voices fade, replaced by the slow breathing of the crew. The air feels thicker now, full of the ghosts of conversations about treasure, freedom, and revenge. Those dreams linger like warmth, long after the rum and lanterns fade. In the hush, you imagine the maps themselves alive, whispering promises as the ship moves, ink lines shifting like rivers, coastlines curling in secret shapes. Perhaps some part of the sea remembers where those promises were meant to lead. There is an entry in an old Portuguese sailor's notebook that reads, "Maps are not for the finding of gold, but for the remembering of home." You wonder if the pirates knew that truth too. The lines they traced might not have led to treasure, but to something softer, a memory of land, of soil that didn't sway beneath their feet. The cold creeps closer again, sliding between seams of wood. You pull your blanket higher. Outside, the sea groans quietly, its voice low and mournful. The map talkers are silent now, their dreams already sailing ahead of the ship. You think of how strange it must have been to fall asleep every night surrounded by myth. These men, feared by empires, found peace in imagination. They fought by day, but by night they built worlds that no storm could touch. Perhaps that is why so many pirate tales survived. Each story told before sleep planted another seed in the world's memory. Somewhere, on a quiet night centuries later, a storyteller would repeat those same words, and the dream would live again. The lantern flickers once and fades. Darkness folds over you like a wave. The faint rustle of parchment lingers in your ears, as if the sea itself is still tracing invisible lines across its own surface. You close your eyes and let yourself drift into that imagined world. The frost no longer bites, the waves no longer threaten. You can almost see the map now, coastlines of memory, islands of warmth, oceans made of sleep. And somewhere in that dream you feel a truth too simple to forget. That hope, drawn in ink and whispered in the dark, is the warmest fire any pirate ever had. The cold feels different tonight, quieter somehow, as if the ship itself has accepted the frost. You wake to a low creak above your head and see hammocks swaying in slow rhythm, their ropes glinting faintly in the weak light. The lanterns have burned low, turning everything amber and soft. Around you, the men sleep at different heights, strung up like a strange constellation of dreaming bodies. You notice something curious about their arrangement. Not every hammock hangs at the same level, and the closer you look, the more deliberate it seems. There was an order to this floating world. Hammocks were not just beds but statements of status. Records from captured pirate ships describe how the hierarchy of the crew appeared most clearly at night. The captain's hammock, wider and lined with better cloth, usually hung near the center of the cabin, where the sway was gentlest. The quartermaster rested nearby, his position marked not by luxury but by access to the door. Those closer to the floor were the younger sailors, the ones still proving their worth. You tilt your head and take in the pattern. It is like the tiers of a theatre, each level with its own view of the room. The higher hammocks sway more softly. The lower ones creak and bump against barrels or beams. The air is colder near the floor, and you can see frost glistening on the boards beneath the bottom row. It is a quiet kind of injustice, softened by the rhythm of sleep. An English traveller who once lived among privateers wrote that every ship carries its own sky, and men hang their stars according to their pride. His words ring true now. Even in sleep, the order of the ship reveals itself. Yet the hierarchy was fluid. Unlike in the Navy, where rank was rigid, pirates earned their place nightly through work, luck, or friendship. A man who braved the stormiest watch might find his hammock raised the next day, while one who shirked his duties could find his lowered to the coldest corner. It is said that disputes sometimes broke out over space. A surviving set of pirate articles from the early 18th century includes a clause about the fair hanging of hammocks. It promised equal distance between beds so no man would swing into another during the night. The rule might sound trivial, but in these cramped quarters, fairness in sleep meant fairness in spirit. You listen to the sound of the hammocks creaking in uneven rhythm. Each one makes its own melody, a reminder that even harmony contains individuality. The higher hammocks swing lazily, like calm waves. The lower ones shift sharply, reacting to every movement of the ship. The effect is hypnotic, a choreography of exhaustion. One hammock in the corner catches your attention. It hangs almost against the ceiling, tied with thick ropes and padded with what looks like stolen velvet. You can imagine the pride its owner feels, sleeping closer to the warmth trapped near the top. Yet just below him, a young sailor huddles under a threadbare blanket, his breath visible in the cold. The contrast feels almost symbolic, fortune and hardship hanging just a few feet apart, bound to the same beam. A curious account from a French prisoner mentions that pirates used their hammocks not just for sleep, but also for negotiation. A man could offer to swap slings as a gesture of apology, giving his warmer spot to another. Such exchanges often settled disputes without words. It was their version of diplomacy, conducted under the dim light of the lanterns. You can see how that might work. The ship at night becomes a quiet court, every hammock a territory. The creak of a rope might mean anger, the rustle of fabric an agreement made. Even rest is political in a world where space and warmth are currency. What fascinates modern historians is how adaptable this system was. Despite their lawlessness, pirates practiced a form of social balance far ahead of their time. The hierarchy of hammocks was temporary, based on merit rather than birth. A man's place could rise or fall as quickly as the tide. It was democracy woven from rope and exhaustion. You close your eyes and imagine looking down from the ceiling. The room below is filled with suspended bodies, each one a world of stories and scars. The lantern light moves like a slow heartbeat, flickering across faces. Some are turned upward, mouths slightly open, others buried in folds of cloth. No two hammocks swing quite the same, yet together they form a rhythm that feels alive. A sailor once wrote that he dreamed better in a crowded cabin than in solitude. When we sway together, he said, the sea feels less endless. You understand that sentiment now. The hammocks are not just beds but lifelines, keeping the men tethered to one another as the world outside tries to freeze them apart. Above, you hear a faint crack as the ice shifts along the mast. The sound ripples through the beams and down into the hammocks, waking no one but echoing through every thread. For a moment, the whole ship seems to breathe in unison, a shared pulse of survival. You adjust your own blanket and let the sound settle. The hierarchy fades in the dark. The captain and the boy, the veteran and the thief all swaying together under the same ceiling, warmed by the same borrowed air. The cold does not care who sleeps higher. It tests them all equally. As the lantern dims further, you feel yourself drifting, rocked gently by the collective rhythm. The hammocks creak again, like a chorus sung in sleep. And in that sound lies the truth of this life, that even in the coldest night, order and chaos find their fragile balance in motion. You wake before dawn, long before the first light touches the frozen sea. The air is so thick with damp and smoke that every breath tastes faintly of tar. You open your eyes and realize that the ship has stopped moving as much. The waves have softened, but the stillness carries its own discomfort. The air below deck feels used, stale, and heavy with the scent of sleep itself. It is a smell unlike anything on land. Tar, rope, unwashed wool, smoke from the lanterns, and the faint rot of damp wood mingle, until they form a single odor that belongs to the sea, Accounts from merchant ships mention the same thing. The smell of a crew's quarters was so distinct that even years later, survivors could recall it instantly. It clung to their clothes, their hair, even their skin. For pirates, it was the perfume of life between battles. You sit up and listen. The hammocks creak. Men shift, cough, stretch. Someone yawns and mutters a prayer. The air stirs slowly, thick with human warmth. You can almost feel the humidity pressing against your face. The walls are slick where condensation has gathered, and droplets slide down in thin, glistening trails. A curious note from a Dutch naval surgeon described this smell as proof of survival. He argued that a healthy ship should stink. The scent of bodies meant warmth. Warmth meant life. A ship that smelled clean in winter was one where the men were dead or dying. You breathe in again, and the logic makes strange sense. The odor is unpleasant but comforting, the scent of persistence. Still, you cannot help wrinkling your nose. Beneath the sweat and wool, there is another layer: fish oil, tar, salt. It smells like the inside of the ocean's throat. The odor seeps into everything. Clothes never dry completely, and blankets become repositories of history. Archaeologists who have examined preserved fabric from shipwrecks say that centuries later, traces of oil and smoke still cling to the threads. You watch one sailor push himself upright, rubbing his face with both hands. His beard glistens with moisture. He sniffs once, grimaces, then laughs softly. "Smells like home," he mutters. His companion groans in agreement and pulls his blanket tighter. The sound is oddly tender, an inside joke that needs no explanation. It was common for pirates to tease newcomers about the smell. One English traveller wrote that green sailors spent their first week gagging, only to find the stench comforting after a month. It marked belonging, a strange kind of baptism by odour. You can picture them now mocking the newcomers as they coughed through the night. Some tried to fight it. A few ships burned herbs or citrus peels near the galley to freshen the air, though the effort was mostly futile. Others hung small bags of crushed mint or lavender near their hammocks, taken from captured cargo. A letter from a French privateer mentions that such scents mixed poorly with tar, creating what he called a perfume of hell. The description makes you smile despite yourself. You notice how smell becomes memory here. The scent of tar brings safety, the reek of smoke means warmth, and even the rank odor of wet wool signals endurance. It's as if the body learns to translate discomfort into reassurance. The human mind adapts, reshaping disgust into nostalgia. Modern researchers studying historical vessels confirm that smell affected morale almost as much as hunger or fatigue. The air below deck was so dense that some men developed mild dizziness or headaches, yet most grew immune to it. They stopped noticing the odor until it vanished. That disappearance, usually after storms when cold air swept through, left them feeling exposed, as if a familiar presence had gone missing. You reach out and touch the beam above you. It feels damp and sticky. A small line of frost has formed where condensation meets the cold wood. The smell of the ship seems to gather in that spot, rich and layered. It is strange to think that thousands of men over centuries all inhaled something similar, the shared scent of hardship and hope. A sailor in a recovered logbook once described his ship as smelling like a life halfway between heaven and earth. You understand now what he meant. It is the scent of existence suspended between survival and surrender. Around you, the crew begins to stir fully. Someone strikes flint against steel, and a spark jumps, lighting another lantern. The glow spreads slowly across the room, revealing faces glistening with sweat and condensation. The smell grows stronger as warmth returns to the air. It is both foul and familiar, an atmosphere that binds everyone together in quiet acceptance. You take another deep breath. The odor fills your lungs, harsh but grounding. The room around you is alive again, vibrating with human sound. The smell of sleep fades into the smell of movement, leather creaking, ropes groaning, faint laughter rolling through the dark. You think about how strange it is that people can learn to love even the foulest parts of their world. For these pirates, the smell of the ship was the smell of freedom, of distance from the rules of land and law. It was the proof that they still lived, still fought, still dreamed beneath the same wooden ceiling. As you lie back in your hammock, you realize that the air, thick and pungent, holds every story this ship has ever known. Sweat from battles, smoke from torches, salt from storms, all of it blended into something human. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you imagine the ship exhaling through its timbers, the scent rising like memory itself. The smell of sleep, terrible and holy, drifts over you one last time before you surrender again to the rhythm of rest. You wake with the faint taste of metal in your mouth and realize that the air has changed. The storm outside has eased, but the silence feels heavier, pressed down by exhaustion. The crew moves more slowly now, as though their bodies have been drained of fire. You can sense it in the way they breathe, in the dullness behind their eyes. Sleep here is no luxury. It is a weapon, sharpened and guarded as carefully as any blade. Historical records from naval surgeons confirm what the pirates already knew by instinct. Fatigue could kill as surely as hunger. A man who had not slept was as dangerous to his comrades as to his enemies. His reactions dulled, his judgment slipped, and in a battle fought on wet planks in howling wind, one moment's hesitation could doom the ship. Captains learned to ration rest as carefully as rations of food or rum. You look around the dim cabin and notice the signs of wear. Faces are drawn tight, skin pale under the flicker of the lantern. One sailor sits with his head in his hands, rocking gently as if keeping time with the creaking timbers. Another sharpens his dagger too slowly, blade scraping rhythmically along the whetstone. These are not gestures of menace, but of survival, attempts to stay awake until their turn to rest arrives. Letters from captured corsairs mention this strange discipline. Men who could sleep anywhere, at any moment, were prized as much as good navigators. They could collapse into slumber between cannon volleys or naps taken in the shadow of storms. Their bodies had learned to treat sleep as a tool, not a luxury. You picture one such man now, a pirate leaning back against a barrel, eyes closing even as the deck tilts beneath him. His fingers remain curled around the hilt of his cutlass, but his breathing steadies. Within seconds, he is gone, sunk into the deep black quiet that only the utterly exhausted can reach. When the next bell rings, he will rise as if nothing happened, his mind wiped clean by necessity. A curious fragment from a privateer's diary calls this the sleep of the hunted. He wrote that men who lived in constant danger learned to rest with one ear open, hearts slowing but never surrendering completely. Their dreams were short and sharp, filled with flashes of light and sound that echoed the life they led. The more you watch, the more you realize how carefully this fragile balance is maintained. The quartermaster walks between hammocks, counting softly under his breath. If a man's sleep goes too long, he is shaken awake, given a sip of water, and told to stretch before lying down again. Oversleeping was as dangerous as sleeplessness. Too much rest made the muscles stiff and the instincts dull. A scholar of maritime psychology once wrote that pirates understood recovery before the term existed. Their nightly routine kept them balanced between exhaustion and alertness, always hovering just above collapse. It was the only way to survive weeks at sea. You can feel the wisdom of that now, deep in your bones, as the rocking of the ship lulls your body toward that same fragile state. The most haunting stories come from men who lost that balance. One legend tells of a lookout who stayed awake for 3 days during a storm. When he finally lay down, he never rose again. His comrades said he was not dead, only sleeping too deeply, caught somewhere between life and dream. No one dared touch him for a full day, fearing his soul would cling to theirs. You shift in your hammock and glance at the others. Even in rest, their bodies carry tension. Hands twitch, shoulders jerk. You can almost see the invisible weight pressing on them, the knowledge that at any moment the sea could demand action. This kind of sleep is not surrender but readiness. The pirates mastered the art of turning rest into defense. One account from a Spanish merchant ship describes the terrifying efficiency of pirates who attacked after midnight. The witness noted that they fought as though they had awoken in battle. It was not bravado but training. Their short, practiced naps allowed them to function at any hour, to turn fatigue into focus. You find it strangely admirable. In a world that devours the unprepared, they made sleep an act of defiance. Each moment of rest reclaimed strength from the cold, from hunger, from fear itself. You wonder if they ever understood that their discipline would echo centuries later, studied by soldiers and scientists alike. The lantern above you flutters in a gust of wind from the hatch. A shadow ripples across the hammocks, and you hear someone murmur, "My turn yet?" The quartermaster's calm voice replies, "Sleep while you can." Those words hang in the air, simple and absolute, like scripture. You let your eyes close again. The ship rocks gently, and the rhythm of breathing around you becomes a tide. You can almost feel the collective heartbeat of the crew, slow and steady, pulsing through the floorboards. It is the sound of endurance. For a brief moment, you understand what it meant for these men to trust sleep so completely. Each nap, each dream, each stolen moment of stillness was an act of courage in a world that refused mercy. Outside, the sea sighs, dark and endless. Inside, the pirates sleep, not as victims of exhaustion but as masters of it, warriors resting between storms. And as your own mind slips toward that edge, you carry their lesson with you. In a world of chaos, sleep itself can be a weapon, and peace can be earned even in the coldest dark. The world outside is silver tonight, the sea stretched wide and pale beneath a thin winter moon. You lie in your hammock, awake but calm, your eyes following the slow sway of shadows above. The storm has passed, leaving the air clear and painfully cold. Every sound seems sharpened, the soft rattle of rope, the low moan of the wind, the distant sigh of water brushing the hull. You tilt your head slightly and look upward toward the masthead, where moonlight spills through the cracks. It is strange how bright the night can be when the moon finds its way through clouds. The light dances across the timbers, turning the rough planks into glassy mirrors. The ocean beyond reflects it too, so that sky and water seem to melt together. Pirates often said that this was the sea's truest hour, when the world forgot where it began or ended. In such moments, men who feared nothing by day found themselves suddenly quiet, watching the moon as though it held their names. According to a few surviving diaries, sailors treated moonlight as a companion. They spoke to it during the night watch, measuring time by how it slid across the deck. A captain's log from 1,705 records that the men looked to her for hours, finding in her face the patience they have lost. You can see why. The moon moves so slowly it feels eternal, yet its light touches every restless surface without judgment. You pull your blanket closer and study the glow where it falls through the hatch. The beams of light form delicate patterns on the floorboards, tracing lines that shift with every motion of the ship. The sight is strangely peaceful. For all its coldness, the moonlight feels alive, like a tide of quiet spilling over the world. You imagine the pirates who once lay here before you, eyes open in the same way, listening to the sea while counting the seconds by the moon's climb. There is a story in an old journal of a pirate who claimed that he could tell the time of night by the angle of moonlight on his hammock. He called it the silver clock. His shipmates laughed, but many came to rely on his uncanny accuracy. Scholars today suspect it was nothing mystical, only practice and observation, but they agree that such habits reveal how deeply these men lived by light and motion. You glance at the ceiling, where the faint glow shivers with every rise and fall of the ship. The movement hypnotizes you. It feels like breathing, an unhurried rhythm that has nothing to do with urgency or danger. The moon's light is steady, indifferent to storms or tempests. For pirates used to chaos, that constancy must have felt sacred. A letter from a sailor's wife tells of her husband who could never sleep indoors after years at sea. He missed the play of light across the walls, the pale shimmer that reminded him of calm nights. He said the moon kept him honest, she wrote, for she saw every man as he truly was. You can imagine him lying awake on land, waiting for a beam of light to move across his ceiling, missing the creak of the ship that once kept him safe. The night grows quieter still. The only motion is the slow turning of the ship and the glimmer of frost forming along the ropes. You watch it gather, shining like dusted glass. A few men stir, their faces ghostly in the faint light. No one speaks. The moon has taken command, and her silence feels like a rule. There was another superstition: never curse under a full moon at sea. To do so was to invite bad weather or betrayal. Some pirates claimed the moon could hear profanity and repay it in kind. Others said that speaking kindly to it brought fair wind. Whether they believed or merely hoped, they always looked upward before sleeping, nodding as though to an old friend. You let your eyes drift toward the crack in the ceiling again. The moon has shifted slightly, casting a thin silver path along the floor. You imagine walking along that light, barefoot, out across the waves until the cold no longer matters. The sound of water and wind melts together, and the boundaries between body and sea blur. Perhaps this is what they meant when they spoke of freedom. A passage from a captured ship's log once described pirates asleep under moonlight as men turned to marble, frozen by silver. Yet the writer admitted that there was beauty in it. He said the scene reminded him that even thieves could look peaceful when the world stopped judging them for an hour. You feel your own eyelids grow heavy. The light moves across your blanket, dimming as a cloud drifts overhead. The ship sighs, and the sound rolls through the timbers like breath. The moon reappears a moment later, pale and forgiving, brushing the walls with light once more. For the pirates, this quiet hour was a rare kind of mercy. No shouts, no battles, no howling wind, only the steady glow of a celestial friend who neither scolded nor praised. Some nights they prayed to it, though they would never admit it. Others simply let its light cradle them until sleep arrived. You close your eyes and listen to the sound of the mast creaking softly above. The moon continues its slow climb, steady and eternal. The ship drifts, rocked by invisible hands. The cold no longer feels cruel. It feels clean, like the air has been washed by silver. And as the world fades, you realize that this light, the moonlight on the masthead, quiet and constant, was the truest companion those pirates ever had. It watched them dream, forgave their sins, and followed them across every frozen sea. The air is colder than before, yet somehow quieter. You wake to the creak of hinges and the soft click of a latch being drawn open. A faint glow spills from the narrow doorway to the surgeon's cabin, a room that always smells faintly of metal, herbs, and ghosts. You slip from your hammock and step closer. Inside, the air feels heavier, thicker with memory. The surgeon's quarters are small, barely wider than a corridor. A wooden table dominates the center, its surface scarred by years of work. Knives hang neatly from nails in the wall, their edges dull with rust and salt. Bottles line the shelf above, filled with murky liquid that catches the lantern light like amber. You can still smell alcohol and vinegar, used both for cleaning wounds and for dulling pain. Every pirate knew that smell, the scent of fear wrapped in false cleanliness. Records from surviving naval ships describe the surgeon's cabin as a place of miracles and nightmares. It was where men were saved and where they were lost, often in the same night. The pirate version was cruder, improvised from stolen tools and instinct. Few surgeons were formally trained. Many were barbers, cooks, or prisoners pressed into the role. Yet by necessity they learned quickly. A man's life often depended on steady hands in a storm. You run your fingers lightly along the edge of the table. The wood is cold, and a small groove beneath your fingertips feels sticky with old residue. You can imagine the scenes that unfolded here. Blood, mixing with candlelight, whispered prayers muffled by the crash of waves, men biting down on leather straps to stop themselves from screaming. Some nights the cabin would glow red, as the lantern reflected off wet blades. It is said that pirates had their own rituals for dealing with pain. One common practice involved the crew gathering nearby to sing softly during amputations, drowning out the victim's cries and giving him rhythm to breathe through. A curious detail found in one surgeon's log records that humming could steady his hand, allowing him to cut faster. Modern historians call it psychological distraction, but the pirates thought of it as respect, a way of keeping a man company as he faced agony. You notice a hammock in the corner, smaller than the others, strung between two beams. This was likely where the surgeon himself slept, though sleep here must have been shallow and uneasy. Even in rest, he would have listened for footsteps in the dark, for the call that meant another body was waiting. The shadows in this room feel different from those in the rest of the ship. They seem thicker, slower to move, as though saturated with memory. A scrap of fabric hangs from a hook, a once white cloth turned brown by time. You touch it gently and wonder whose life it might have saved or failed to save. Accounts from wreck salvages often reveal medical tools scattered across the surgeon's quarters. Saws, needles, and clamps still resting exactly where they were left. It seems that even when death claimed the ship, this cabin remained untouched, as though the ghosts of its work refused to let go. You look at the bottles again. One holds what appears to be a faintly glowing liquid. Perhaps it is the oil once used for lamps, or perhaps it is brandy laced with herbs. Sailors trusted such concoctions to fight infection, though most were more superstition than science. Some surgeons used ground coral or powdered bone as antiseptic, believing the ocean itself could heal what it had wounded. Whether that belief ever saved a life remains uncertain, but faith has always been a powerful medicine. A curious story from an old sea diary tells of a surgeon who claimed that a ship could sense the pain of its crew. He said that after an amputation, the planks beneath him would groan differently, as if mourning. His comrades laughed, but none could deny that the sound of the sea always grew louder on such nights. Maybe it was imagination. Maybe it was empathy carved into timber. You step back and take in the stillness of the room. The lantern light trembles on the jars and instruments, making them seem alive. It is easy to understand why sailors avoided this place unless absolutely necessary. Even when no blood was spilled, the air here held too much memory. Yet there is something sacred about it too. In a world that thrived on taking, this was a place that tried to give something back, however clumsily. The surgeon's cabin was where death was challenged, if only for a few minutes at a time. You hear a sound behind you, a soft groan from the man sleeping nearest the door. His hand clutches his arm where a bandage has been wrapped tight. The cloth is stained but clean. The surgeon must have worked not long ago. The patient's breathing steadies again, and you exhale without realizing you were holding your breath. The lantern flickers lower. The golden light fades to a dull red, then to shadow. You step quietly back toward your own hammock. The smell of the cabin lingers on your clothes, sharp and sour. It is not a pleasant smell, yet there is something reassuring in it. It means that even here, in the coldest corner of the world, someone still fought for life. You lie back down and close your eyes. The memory of that room stays behind your eyelids. The glow of the lantern, the shimmer of steel, the rhythm of breath and blade. It is not peaceful, but it is honest. As sleep pulls you under again, you think of the surgeon's lonely hammock and the men who trusted his trembling hands. In a life built on chaos, he was the one who tried, again and again, to keep the darkness waiting just a little longer. The air feels thick with quiet when you wake. The ship hardly moves, as if the sea itself has grown tired. You open your eyes to the faint glimmer of lantern light spilling through a gap in the beams. For a moment it looks like dawn, but then you hear it, the slow, gentle clinking of something delicate. The sound does not belong to the ocean. It is music. You turn your head toward the source. A pirate sits cross-legged on the floor, his back hunched, his hands moving over a small contraption that catches the light. It takes you a second to realize what you are looking at. A tiny music box carved from bone. The pale material gleams under the lantern's glow. the surface etched with lines that shimmer like frost. The tune it plays is faint, uneven, but hauntingly sweet. Sailors often built strange things from the debris of their journeys. According to recovered ship logs, bone and ivory from whales or cattle became raw material for combs, beads, pipes, and trinkets. But among pirates, such crafts carried an extra weight. Each object was both pastime and confession, shaped by hands that needed to keep busy through long nights of cold and guilt. The music box before you must have taken weeks to make. The lid is smooth except for one carved design, a pair of wings folded around a skull. When the man winds it, the tiny gears whisper against one another. The melody that escapes is simple, a sequence of notes that sound almost like a lullaby. You can feel the room soften around it. The other men do not tell him to stop. They listen, motionless, eyes closed, as if the music belongs to them too. There are references in maritime archives to these bone-made instruments. Some were flutes, others were crude violins built from driftwood and wire. The most remarkable find came from a wreck near the Azores, a box nearly identical to this one, its crank still intact after 2 centuries. When restored, it played a tune that researchers identified as a fragment of a French lullaby. No one knows how it found its way aboard a pirate ship, but the discovery proves what history often forgets. Even those who lived by the sword needed softness. You watch the craftsman's fingers. They are rough, cracked, and scarred, yet he handles the fragile gears as though touching glass. He leans close, humming along under his breath. The sound rises, faint but steady, filling the cabin with a kind of reverence. For a moment, it feels as though time itself slows to listen. Another man nearby reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small whistle carved from coral. He joins the tune, blowing lightly, barely audible. Soon a third voice hums from a hammock, and then another. What begins as a fragile melody becomes a web of harmony. The song drifts through the air like smoke, winding around the beams, touching even the coldest corners. You realize that this, too, was part of how they endured. Music, even crude and broken, stitched their souls back together after days of fear and violence. A note found in a sailor's diary from 1711 speaks of nightly concerts for the heart made of noise and memory. He wrote that such sounds reminded them they were still human when the sea tried to make them otherwise. One curious legend tells of a pirate who believed the sea could hear his music. He claimed that playing his bone flute calmed storms. His comrades teased him until one night. After he played through a gale, the winds eased. From then on, no one mocked him again. Historians doubt the story, yet acknowledge that belief itself often worked miracles aboard ships where hope was scarce. The melody continues, low and patient. The ship rocks just enough to keep rhythm. You feel the vibration through the floorboards, subtle but constant, like the heartbeat of the vessel itself. The cold still creeps along the walls, but it feels less cruel now, wrapped in the warmth of sound. The man finishes the tune and lets his hands fall to his knees. Silence returns slowly, not abrupt but fading like a sigh. One of the older sailors mutters, "Play it again when the wind rises." The musician nods without looking up. He closes the box and sets it gently beside his hammock. The faint clicking of the lid echoes like the punctuation of a prayer. Modern scholars who study maritime artifacts describe this kind of craftsmanship as a survival language, an unspoken dialogue between suffering and imagination. The pirates did not carve from luxury, they carved from necessity. Each small creation was proof that even in a world ruled by violence and frost, beauty could still exist. You look once more at the tiny box, its pale edges glowing in the lantern light. Somewhere inside, a coil of wire still holds tension, ready to sing again. Perhaps the next storm will wake it. Perhaps it will outlive every man aboard, resting quietly in the depths until someone far in the future winds it once more. You lie back in your hammock and listen to the last faint echo of the melody vibrating through the wood. The sea resumes its own rhythm outside, slow and endless. For a few precious moments, the music and the waves seem to breathe together. The ship feels warmer. So does your chest. You close your eyes. The tune lingers, faint but steady, and the line between man and ghost feels thinner, softer. In that sound, you hear what no history book ever records, the echo of tired hearts finding beauty in the dark. The wind has changed. When you wake, the air no longer smells of salt and ice, but of soil and smoke. The ship moves slower now, and the sound beneath the hull has softened to the hush of water against wood. You climb up toward the hatch and squint through a slit in the boards. Beyond the rail, the dark outline of land waits beneath a grey horizon. After weeks adrift in cold and wind, the pirates have found a harbour. Winter ports were rare gifts. In the coldest months, even pirates sought shelter where the sea grudgingly allowed it. Historical records describe such harbours as lonely, half-frozen places where the crew could repair their ship, mend their clothes, and sleep without fear of sinking. The men would stagger ashore like ghosts, their legs trembling from too many nights spent rocking with the waves. You follow them now in your mind's eye as they step onto the dock. The snow crunches beneath their boots. They blink at the strange stillness of the land. Even their voices sound different here, rougher, louder, as if surprised to hear themselves in open air. They stretch, yawn, and laugh, the tension draining from their faces. The harbour is small, just a scattering of huts and a tavern with smoke curling from its chimney. A Dutch traveller's diary from 1708 describes one such port, a place where time forgets to move, and men move like shadows through the frost. The writer noted that the tavern smelled of pine and old rum, and that pirates sat near the hearth, not as conquerors, but as weary pilgrims. You can picture the scene now, wet coats, steaming, boots drying by the fire, laughter rising slowly after weeks of silence. Inside that tavern, sleep came differently. No hammocks, no swaying deck, only the hard comfort of wooden floors and benches. Some stretched out beside the fire, others collapsed at tables with mugs still in their hands. A few, too restless to sleep indoors, stayed on the dock beneath the stars, staring at the still water as though waiting for it to breathe again. One sailor's letter describes his first night on land after months at sea. The bed did not move, and I could not rest. I missed the heartbeat of the waves. You understand what he meant. After so long in motion, the absence of rhythm must have felt unsettling, as if the world had stopped turning. The pirates likely experienced the same unease, their bodies tuned to the sea's music even as they longed for quiet. You imagine the warmth of that tavern now. The fire burns low, its light flickering against the walls. The men sleep in uneven piles, blankets tangled, boots scattered. The air hums with the soft hiss of logs splitting. The smell of smoke and sweat mingles with pine resin and baked bread. It is not clean, but it is alive. For the first time in months, no one rocks in his sleep. Outside, the harbour groans beneath thin ice. Ships rest in the still water, their masts crusted with frost. The sky above is colourless, the kind of pale that erases distance. A cat prowls along the dock, paw prints vanishing as snow begins to fall again. Somewhere nearby, a church bell tolls, its sound carrying through the cold air like a memory. Some historians believe these brief winter ports shaped pirate folklore more than the sea itself. Here, cut off from storms and battle, they told stories, carved charms, and rewrote their own legends. They traded with fishermen, sang with locals, and sometimes disappeared into villages for weeks before returning to the ship. In those pauses between voyages, they were simply men trying to remember what it felt like to be human. One curious entry in a coastal ledger mentions a pirate who spent an entire winter mending sails for villagers in exchange for warm food. When spring came, he refused to leave until the ice melted from the bay. He said the sea would wait for him, the entry notes. Perhaps he just needed to remember how stillness felt. You close your eyes and picture that harbour again. Snowflakes drift through lamplight, soft as ash. The tavern door creaks open. releasing a spill of warmth into the night. Inside, someone snores beside the fire. Another stirs his drink in his sleep. It is peaceful, fragile, the kind of peace that feels temporary even as you breathe it in. The pirates who slept through that winter would carry the memory with them when they returned to the sea. They would remember the solid ground beneath their boots, the heat of the fire, and the smell of wood smoke in their hair. Those memories would warm them through many frozen nights to come. A sailor's diary recovered from the Baltic tells of this longing. When I dream at sea, it is not of gold but of the sound of snow against the roof. You can almost hear that sound now, soft and steady, wrapping the harbour like a lullaby. The sea waits beyond the breakwater, patient and dark, but for tonight it allows its wanderers to rest. You feel that stillness settle inside you too, a rare calm that belongs to solid ground. As the last embers of the fire fade, the pirates sleep without fear of frostbite or drowning. The wind outside carries the faint smell of salt back toward the waves, as if reminding them that this peace is only borrowed. Yet even borrowed peace can be enough. You lie back in your mind's hammock, warm from the fire, and let the image dissolve into darkness. The frozen harbour, the hush of snow, the quiet gratitude of men who have found, at least for one night, a place to rest. The snow outside has stopped falling, leaving the world washed clean and quiet. Inside the tavern, the last of the fire still breathes, its glow stretching across the floor in uneven stripes of gold. You wake slowly, listening to the sound of low voices near the far wall. Two pirates sit at a wooden table, a single candle flickering between them. One holds something small in his hand, a folded scrap of parchment that he smooths out carefully on the table's surface. The other leans forward, eyes fixed on it. It takes you a moment to understand what you are seeing. The parchment is not a map this time, but a letter, a love letter, its edges softened by travel and time. The man reading it speaks quietly, his voice low and deliberate, as though saying the words aloud keeps them alive. The other listens, his eyes unfocused, perhaps thinking of someone he left behind too. Personal letters were treasures rarer than gold aboard pirate ships. According to naval records, many men carried fragments of handwriting tucked into their clothes or stitched inside their bedding. Paper was fragile at sea, but love made men inventive. Some pressed letters between boards, some wrapped them in oiled cloth, and a few sewed them beneath the seams of their hammocks, believing the words would guard their dreams. You watch as the reader finishes the letter and folds it again, running his thumb across the creases. He doesn't smile or speak. He simply tucks it carefully into the lining of his coat, near his chest. The other man nods, and they sit in silence, staring into the candle flame as though it connects them to a world far away. A diary found in a sunken frigate once described this custom. Sailors, it said, often slept with letters pressed against their skin, especially during winter voyages. The warmth of the body, they believed, kept the ink from fading. Modern conservators who have examined such artifacts confirm that the oils of human touch did preserve the writing better than air alone. It seems the heart truly did protect what the sea might destroy. You think about the irony of it. Men who stole for a living guarding scraps of paper as though they were holy, yet perhaps that is what kept them from losing their humanity. In the frozen dark of the ocean, words written by someone who once cared could serve as a light no storm could snuff out. The pirate at the table takes a deep breath and pulls another small object from his pocket, a square of cloth, torn from what looks like a handkerchief. He unfolds it to reveal a tiny knot tied in the corner, the thread frayed but still holding. You can tell immediately that it means something. A sailor's superstition, perhaps, or a promise. There is a story in every knot aboard a ship. A note from an English privateer mentions how lovers or wives sometimes tied threads into fabric before their husbands set sail, each knot symbolizing a prayer for safe return. Some men refused to untie them even after years at sea. Others buried the cloth with fallen comrades, believing the wishes should never be wasted. The one you see now is likely older than its owner. He presses it against his lips for a moment before hiding it back beneath his collar. A curious rumor among coastal villages claimed that pirates sent coded messages by weaving patterns into rope or embroidery, using tiny differences in the stitching to mark words. Whether true or imagined, such stories reveal the same longing, the need to stay connected when the world turns too wide. You glance around the tavern and notice you are not the only one awake. Near the hearth, a few other men stir. One hums softly to himself. Another stares into the flames with his chin resting on his arms. It is too early for laughter or rum. Instead, the air feels heavy with the quiet ache of memory. These men, who faced cannon fire and storms without flinching, look suddenly fragile in the dim light. A scholar once wrote that every pirate carried two ghosts, the one he created by leaving home, and the one waiting for him to return. Tonight, both ghosts seem to sit among the crew, warmed by the same fire. The man with the letter rises, stretching stiffly. He walks toward his bunk in the corner and kneels, reaching beneath the blanket. When he lifts it again, you see the glint of something sewn into the fabric. The shape is small, irregular, but unmistakable, a pocket stitched by hand, its contents hidden deep inside. He tucks the letter there and smooths the cloth, whispering something you cannot hear. The gesture is quiet, private, sacred. Modern historians examining shipwrecked textiles have found seams reinforced in unusual ways, often thicker or double-stitched in places that served no practical purpose. Some contained folded paper, bits of ribbon, or dried flowers. These tiny secret pockets, they believe, held personal relics like this one. It was how sailors brought love to sea without risking loss. You look at the man again. He sits back against the wall, eyes half closed, as though listening to the memory of the voice that wrote the letter. The candle between him and his companion gutters once, then steadies. Its flame paints a faint shimmer across the wooden walls. Outside, the snow begins again, thin flakes drifting past the window like ash. The sound of the wind returns, brushing softly against the panes. Inside, no one speaks. The silence feels full, not empty, a silence of things too dear to name aloud. You close your eyes and breathe slowly, letting the warmth of the room seep into your bones. You think about the letters hidden in bedding, the knots tied in cloth, the hands that wrote words now carried across the world. They are the quietest kind of treasure, immune to theft, untouched by frost. And as the fire crackles lower, you understand that love, carried in pockets and stitched into blankets, was the only warmth these men could keep forever. It glows here still, faint and steady, long after their voices have faded. The morning comes quietly. The storm has passed, and the harbour still sleeps under a veil of mist. You open your eyes to the sound of boots on wet planks and the creak of barrels being rolled across the dock. The pirates are awake again, their brief peace already fading as preparation begins for departure. Inside the tavern, the embers have burned down to grey ash. The air smells of pine smoke and damp wool. You stretch and watch as a few men pack their gear. They move slowly, not from laziness but from the reluctance of leaving warmth behind. Each motion feels deliberate, almost ceremonial, as though they know the comfort of land will not come again soon. In historical accounts, winter departures were the hardest moments of a sailor's life. Ships had to be pushed from frozen docks with poles and ropes, their hulls scraping against the ice like wounded beasts. Pirates, though lawless, followed the same rituals as any mariner, oiling ropes, patching sails, whispering charms to the sea. A few spat into the water before boarding, an old superstition meant to ensure safe passage. You can almost see them now, muttering to the ocean as if asking permission to return. One sailor, his beard crusted with frost, pauses at the dock's edge and looks back toward the tavern. He holds a small object, a coin, tarnished and worn smooth. He kisses it once and tosses it into the water. A simple act, yet it carries centuries of meaning. Maritime folklore says that a coin offered to the sea repays the debt of survival. The ocean takes what it is owed, and in return, Perhaps she spares the ship a while longer. The rest of the crew gathers near the gangway, stamping their feet against the cold. The quartermaster calls out names, ticking them off with practiced precision. No one jokes now. The laughter of the night before has dissolved into silence. Departure is always solemn. Each man knows the risks waiting beyond the harbour's mouth. A journal from a captured sailor describes the feeling perfectly. To leave land in winter is to shake hands with death, and trust he will be polite enough to wait. The words feel heavy in the air. You watch as the crew boards one by one, their faces pale under the grey light. Each step on the gangplank is both a farewell and an oath. You follow them in your imagination back onto the ship. The deck is slick with frost, the rigging stiff, the ropes creaking as the sails are unfurled. The ship shudders as it loosens from the ice and begins to drift forward. The harbour grows smaller behind them, a blur of white and smoke. The sound of the water deepens again, the rhythm familiar, comforting in its danger. Below deck, the hammocks sway slightly as the motion returns. The men settle back into their rhythm, the temporary comfort of solid ground already fading from memory. A few unpack small souvenirs from shore, a loaf of bread, a carved charm, a sprig of evergreen tied to a beam. These small tokens will carry the scent of land for a few days before the sea claims them too. There is a certain grace in the way pirates accepted this endless cycle of arrival and departure. They were men of movement, bound to no country but the ocean. Historians still debate whether their restlessness was born of greed or freedom, but perhaps it was simply habit. After too many nights in motion, stillness itself became unbearable. You can imagine the captain now, standing at the helm, his hands steady on the wheel. He says nothing as the wind catches the sails. The sound of ice cracking beneath the hull echoes like applause from an invisible audience. The crew moves quickly, adjusting lines and shouting commands. The ship answers like a living creature, groaning, shivering, then gliding forward. A curious entry in an old ship's log records that before each departure, some pirates held a brief moment of silence, not for prayer but for memory. They believed that if they left the land in anger, the sea would mirror it. So they breathed deeply, cleared their minds, and faced the horizon with calm hearts. You can almost feel that collective stillness now, the weight of resolve settling over every man aboard. The cold grows sharper as the harbour disappears. The world becomes blue and white again, sky blending into sea. The air tastes of salt, and the first spray of water hits your face like a slap from an old friend. The ship leans forward, cutting through thin ice that breaks apart with a crunch. The rhythm of the voyage returns, ancient and familiar. Below, the hammocks swing once more. The cats curl into corners. The music box waits in its drawer. The hidden letters lie still inside their stitched seams. Every story, every warmth from the harbour, returns to sleep within the ship. The pirates breathe together again, part of the same heartbeat that beats only for motion. You lie back in your hammock and listen to the ocean resuming its lullaby. The frost creeps back along the beams, glittering faintly in the grey light. The fire's scent fades, replaced by salt and cold. The ship, alive again, sighs through its timbers. The harbour behind is already fading from memory, but its warmth lingers faintly in your chest, like the echo of a dream too kind to forget. You close your eyes, feeling the deck move beneath you. The sea has taken you back, patient and unyielding. Sleep comes easily again, not because the world is safe, but because it is familiar. And so, the voyage begins anew. The pirates cradled once more in the cold arms of the endless sea. The rhythm of the ship has returned to its steady pulse. You wake to the familiar sounds that had vanished in the quiet harbour. The groan of wood, the flap of stiff canvas, the slow sigh of waves brushing the hull. The sea stretches to every horizon, a field of frozen grey that glimmers faintly beneath the morning light. The cold is sharper now, slicing through even the thickest coats, but the men seem steadier for it. Their land-born softness has vanished. They belong to the water again. You pull the blanket closer around you and listen to the low murmur of voices. Someone hums a tune, a rough chant that sounds half like prayer and half like rhythm for work. The crew has returned to their routine. Movement is what keeps them warm. Pirate life was not chaos all the time. In fact, when the sea was calm, it became almost monotonous. Historical journals often note that the quiet days between storms were the hardest. There was too much stillness, too much space for the mind to wander. Men filled those gaps with work, superstition, or stories. Some polished their weapons until they gleamed. Others carved bits of driftwood into charms. Even sleep felt like a form of labor, a way to pass time without going mad. You rise slowly and make your way to the deck. The cold air stings your lungs, and frost cracks under your boots. The sky above is nearly white, pale and endless. The wind carries a dry chill that freezes your eyelashes. Around you, the pirates move with purpose. They coil ropes, check sails, scrape ice from the rigging. Each task is small, repetitive, and vital. A letter written by a captured merchant describes how pirate crews used daily tasks to preserve order. Work, he wrote, was their only law. Without hierarchy or routine, the ship would dissolve into chaos within days. The quartermaster ensured that no man's hands stayed idle too long, for idleness was the sea's greatest enemy. You watch as two men scrub the deck with brushes made from bundled rope. The bristles scrape against the wood in slow circles. Steam rises where they pour buckets of seawater, though the liquid freezes almost instantly around the edges. Their laughter sounds brittle, breaking easily in the wind. One of them looks up and grins, his teeth white against his frost-burned face. "Keeps the blood alive," he says to no one in particular, and resumes his work. There is something oddly meditative about the sight. The deck gleams faintly where the ice melts. The sound of brushes and ropes forms a rhythm that matches the waves below. This harmony between labor and nature feels ancient, instinctive. You realize that in its repetition lies peace. In many naval records, sailors compared their routines to breathing. "Each day," one wrote, "we work so the ship may live." The tasks were endless mending, scrubbing, watching, hauling, but they were what kept despair away. Even pirates, untamed as they were, obeyed this silent rule. Movement meant life. One curious note from a 17th century logbook describes a ritual some crews performed on long, cold mornings. Before breakfast, they would beat their chests and stomp their boots in unison, calling it waking the ship. Some historians think it was practical, a way to stay warm. Others believe it was symbolic, a reminder that they and the vessel were one body. You can picture it now, dozens of men stamping in rhythm on the icy deck, their breath rising like smoke, their voices rough but alive. You stand quietly near the mast, letting the sound of their work surround you. Every scrape, every grunt, every hiss of wind feels like part of a single vast song. The sea listens, and the ship answers. The pirates move together, united by necessity, their bodies performing an old choreography passed from one generation of sailors to the next. The cold deepens as the sun climbs higher. Frost forms patterns on the ropes like white veins. The ship's cat slinks across the deck, tail high, pausing to sniff at a coil of line. A sailor reaches down to scratch its head, then goes back to work. Even small gestures like that seem precious here, moments of gentleness woven into the rhythm of endurance. A passage from a maritime chronicler notes that sailors often described their daily routines in the language of prayer. They spoke of offering hours to the sea, as monks offered hours to God. The line between survival and devotion blurred. The act of cleaning a deck became an act of faith. You lean against the rail, your fingers aching from the cold, and let your mind drift. The ocean stretches endlessly, yet the ship feels alive beneath you. Every sound, the brush against wood, the sigh of ropes, the steady murmur of the crew becomes part of a great heartbeat. There is no grandeur here, no treasure or conquest, only the quiet dignity of repetition. The pirates may never know peace in the world's eyes, but here, in this moment, their work is prayer, their breath is rhythm, and their rest will come honestly when the night arrives. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the sound of brushes scraping the deck, and feel a strange calm. The wind touches your face like a hand both cold and kind. The sea hums beneath you, ancient and endless, and you realize that every motion, every pull of rope, every swing of brush has carried you closer to understanding why they could sleep so well, even in the coldest nights. You take one last deep breath of the frozen air and return below deck. The warmth there feels different now. It is not comfort but reward, earned through motion, through effort, through faith in the rhythm that never stops. You lie down in your hammock once more, the sound of the work still echoing faintly through the wood. The cold waits outside, but inside there is movement, purpose, and life. Sleep comes easily. The sea keeps breathing. The night has settled again, heavy and hushed. You wake to the faint clinking of glass and the slow rustle of cloth. The air smells faintly of smoke, candle wax, and the lingering sweetness of rum. A single lantern burns low near the center beam, its flame a small golden pulse in the dark. Around it sit a few pirates, faces dimly lit, their shadows stretched high against the wooden walls. They speak in quiet tones, voices softened by fatigue. Tonight, it is story time. No one announces it, and no one needs to. The stories come naturally, like breathing. Every ship had its storytellers, men whose voices could hold attention even in the coldest hours. They were not always the loudest or the bravest, but they had memory, and that was a kind of power. You shift in your hammock and listen as one begins. He speaks of a ship swallowed by ice near Greenland, its crew frozen mid-motion, their faces still smiling when discovered years later. Another adds that the sea keeps such men as statues beneath her floor, preserving them like saints of salt. The listeners hum in quiet approval. You can tell they have heard this one before, yet they let it unfold again, like a lullaby too familiar to forget. Maritime historians have long noted that storytelling was as vital to sailors as food or warmth. On long voyages, it was how knowledge passed, how fears were shared, and how sanity held together. Some tales were warnings disguised as myths, others were lies so beautiful they might as well have been prayers. The sea gave them endless material, and memory gave it shape. The next storyteller clears his throat and leans forward. His voice is rough, deep, touched by the rhythm of the waves. He begins a story about a ghost ship, a vessel seen only on the coldest nights, its sails glowing white as frost. Those who glimpsed it were said to be marked for death within the month. A few of the men chuckle nervously. Someone spits into the corner for luck, even the superstitious need to pretend they are not afraid. There are records from the 17th century of sailors swearing they saw such lights, distant and silent, drifting across fog. Scientists later called them tricks of reflection, illusions of the moon on mist. But the pirates would never have accepted that. For them, the world was alive with intention. Every sound, every shimmer, every change in wind carried meaning. The ocean was a storyteller too, and its tales were not always kind. You feel the rhythm of their speech rise and fall with the rocking of the ship. The candle flickers, the shadows sway. The stories twist through the air like smoke mingling with the cold. A man in the back murmurs an old song, one without words, just a low hum that fills the spaces between tales. The sound turns the cabin into something almost holy. A curious entry from an old privateer's journal describes nights exactly like this. "We spoke of ghosts until our bones grew warm," he wrote. The telling itself was fire. Modern psychologists might call it collective therapy, but back then, it was simply survival. The act of speaking shaped courage, even when the words were nonsense. You can hear the next voice begin, softer, slower. He tells of a boy who once fell overboard in icy water. When they pulled him out, his lips were blue, his eyes closed. They thought him dead, but then he gasped and said he had heard singing below the waves, like a choir calling him home. The men in the cabin shift uneasily. One of them mutters that the boy was lucky to return. Another shakes his head. Or unlucky, he says quietly. There is always that uncertainty in their stories. The sea gives and takes without reason, and the pirates have learned to live inside that paradox. They tell tales not to explain the world, but to make peace with its mystery. A scholar once observed that pirates shared stories as democratically as they shared loot. No voice held more authority than another. The captain could be interrupted by the youngest deckhand if his tale dragged too long. Everyone's fear deserved equal time. You see that dynamic now. The ebb and flow of attention, the laughter that follows exaggeration, the respectful silence when the ending turns solemn. The last story comes from the oldest sailor, a man whose face looks carved from driftwood. He speaks slowly, choosing each word as if it costs something to release. His tale is not about gold or ghosts, but about sleep itself. He says the sea dreams of every ship that crosses it. Each vessel leaves a shadow behind, a reflection that never fades. When the wind stills, those shadows rise to the surface, trying to return home. He pauses, letting the image settle. That's why the water glows sometimes, he adds. Those are the dreams of the drowned. No one laughs this time. The cabin falls silent, filled only by the sound of the ship shifting in the waves. You can feel a quiet reverence, the kind that comes only when truth and imagination blur together. A ship surgeon once wrote that belief itself kept sailors sane. Faith in stories, he noted, is the same as faith in sleep. Both are surrender. You understand that now. These tales, whether true or not, are the crew's way of releasing their fear before closing their eyes. The lantern burns lower, the voices fade, and the last sound is a whisper of breath as the men drift off one by one. The candlelight trembles, then steadies, painting faint halos across the beams. The ship sighs, almost as if satisfied with the stories it has heard. You close your eyes too, feeling the hum of their words settle deep inside you. The sea outside is dark, but within the ship, the light of their voices still lingers, gentle and alive. And as you fall asleep, you realize that in this world of frost and danger, stories are warmth, memory, and prayer all at once. The sea is restless again. You wake to the sound of wind rising in short, sharp bursts, the kind that makes the ropes tremble and the masts creak like tired bones. The air is colder, and the faint smell of snow drifts through the cracks of the hull. Around you, the men stir in their hammocks, grumbling softly as they feel the shift in the ship's motion. The calm of storytelling has vanished. The ocean is impatient once more. The pirates move quickly, practiced and silent. In moments like this, there is no shouting, only rhythm. They pull on boots, tie scarves around their faces, and climb toward the deck. You follow, feeling the temperature drop with every step upward. When you reach the top, the sky hits you like a wave. It is wide, wild, and full of white breath. Snowflakes whirl sideways through the air, not falling but flying, slicing across the deck in thin silver streaks. The sea churns beneath the ship, dark water rolling under the veil of snow. It is a dangerous beauty. A storm is building, not one of thunder but of cold and wind. The pirates know the signs. Historical accounts describe these winter tempests as some of the most feared on any sea. The air froze in seconds, ropes turned to stone, and sails stiffened until they cracked like parchment. There was no thunder, only the deep, constant howl of wind through the rigging, a sound sailors called the voice of winter. You watch as the captain stands near the helm, his coat pulled tight, his face unreadable. He doesn't speak, but the crew moves around him like an extension of his thoughts. The sails are lowered, lines secured, barrels lashed down. Every motion is part of a ritual older than memory. One man shouts that the temperature is dropping faster than it should. Another nods grimly and checks the ropes again. The deck has begun to frost over, thin layers of ice forming wherever a boot or hand does not touch. A cat darts across the planks, tail puffed, and vanishes below. A naval surgeon who once survived such a storm wrote that the cold itself takes command. You can feel it now. The wind strips the warmth from your hands and cheeks within seconds. The salt spray freezes on your coat. Every sound seems amplified. The slam of waves, the groan of wood, the whine of ropes pulled too tight. The crew moves like a machine, yet within the rhythm you sense fear. It is not panic but reverence. They know that no man commands the sea tonight. Even pirates, who defied nations and kings, bowed to the weather when it came with this kind of power. One curious letter from a captured buccaneer describes how his ship survived a similar storm by listening to the sea. He claimed that the ocean would whisper when to act, when to pull the lines, when to steer away, when to trust stillness. Historians debate whether this was instinct or imagination, but the phrasing feels true. You can almost hear that whisper now, in the rush of wind against your ears. The storm tightens, snow turns heavier, and the sky folds into darkness. The world becomes a blur of white and grey. The pirates wrap scarves over their faces, leaving only their eyes visible. Their movements slow, not from fear but from resistance. The wind pushes back. One man stumbles near the bow, slipping on ice. Another catches him before he falls overboard. The small act goes unspoken, but it matters more than gold. Survival here depends on the touch of another's hand at the right moment. There are no songs tonight, no laughter, only the sound of the ship fighting to stay alive. Every beam groans like an old tree under snow. You look upward and see frost forming on the ropes in glittering webs, each thread trembling in the gale. The moon flickers faintly behind the clouds, a ghostly eye watching the struggle. A scholar of maritime history once noted that winter storms broke ships more often through silence than violence. It was not the waves that killed, but the cold, the creeping stillness of ice turning strength brittle. You understand that now as the wind pauses for a heartbeat and the world seems to freeze in place. Then, with a roar, it starts again. The pirates work without pause, their breath visible in the air. The captain grips the wheel so tightly his knuckles shine pale in the dark. He leans into the motion, guiding the ship with the patience of someone who has bargained with the sea before. Below deck, the hammocks sway violently, chains clinking against beams. Water seeps in from somewhere near the hull, pooling across the floor. The men who are not on deck gather to bail it out, their hands red from the cold, their movements mechanical. Someone hums under his breath again, that same wordless melody you've heard before. It keeps rhythm with the waves. Time blurs. The wind rises and falls in uneven cycles, as though the sea itself is breathing too hard. Hours pass unnoticed. The pirates' faces grow white with frost. The cold steals the edges of thought. The world reduces to motion, pull, hold, wait, breathe. At last, when it seems the storm might tear the ship apart, the wind falters. The air lightens. The snow slows to a soft drift. A faint grey glow returns to the horizon. The men stay still for a long moment, as if afraid to believe it's over. Then one begins to laugh quietly, more relief than joy. You exhale without realizing you've been holding your breath. The ship creaks, battered but alive. Ice coats its sides, but the sails still hang. The masts still stand. The pirates move again, checking ropes, freeing frozen pulleys, murmuring thanks to no one in particular. A note found in the log of an old whaling ship captures this feeling perfectly. When the sea shows mercy, we do not cheer. We whisper, "You understand why." The silence after a storm feels too fragile to break. You turn your eyes upward once more. The clouds are thinning, and the faint outline of the moon emerges again. It looks softer now, blurred by frost, as if smiling. The pirates go below deck one by one, their bodies shaking with exhaustion. You follow, the heat of the lanterns feeling almost unreal after the wind. The air smells again of life, sweat, wood, and smoke. No one speaks. The creak of hammocks replaces the roar of waves. You lie down, still feeling the rhythm of the sea in your bones. The cold lingers, but sleep comes quickly. The ship breathes beside you, tired but undefeated. Outside, The ocean settles, rocking its children back toward dreams. Morning breaks slowly, pale and uncertain. The storm is gone, leaving a strange calm in its wake. You open your eyes to the faint gleam of frost melting on the beams above. The ship drifts gently now, its timbers sighing as if relieved. You can hear soft murmurs of movement, men stirring, stretching, reacquainting themselves with the ordinary world. The air smells faintly of salt and smoke, sharper now that the wind has quieted. You push yourself upright and feel how heavy your body has become, weighed down by exhaustion and the memory of fear. Around you, others move carefully, as though afraid that speaking too loudly might wake the sea again. One pirate sits near the hatch, sharpening his knife on a piece of stone. The slow scrape of metal on grit fills the silence. Another hums a tune, almost too soft to hear. The rhythm of their work feels fragile, like a heartbeat after illness. A diary recovered from a 17th century wreck describes this same silence after storms. "No man speaks much," the sailor wrote. "We count what lives remain, and remember the ones that do not." The words fit perfectly here. The crew seems smaller today. You can't tell who is missing, but the space between hammocks feels wider, as if the air itself has thinned. Loss was constant in this world. Historians note that pirate crews rarely kept written memorials. They buried their dead in the sea, unmarked and wordless. The ocean was both their cradle and their grave. A man might be remembered for a few nights in whispers, and then the tide would take even that memory away. You watch as the quartermaster pours a small measure of rum into a tin cup. He raises it toward the ceiling, says nothing, and drinks. The others follow his gesture in silence. It is not a ceremony, not really just habit, an instinct born from the need to acknowledge survival. The smell of rum spreads through the cabin, rich and heavy, warming the cold air. One sailor murmurs a few words in another language, perhaps a prayer. Another rubs a charm carved from bone between his fingers. You realize that even pirates, who claimed no gods, found their own ways of speaking to the unknown. A curious note from a French surgeon's log mentions that after storms, crews often reported strange dreams. Some dreamed of calm seas that stretched forever. Others saw lights beneath the water or faces in the waves. The surgeon dismissed these as exhaustion, but his words carry wonder. Perhaps the sea lets us look into her thoughts when she has finished being angry. You glance toward the narrow window and see that the water outside has changed color. It is no longer grey but greenish blue, clear enough to glimpse movement below. The sun breaks through for the first time in days, its reflection turning the surface into glass. For a fleeting moment, it feels as though the world has begun again. The men notice it too. They drift toward the light, leaning against the walls or resting near the hatch to feel the warmth. The quiet fills with breathing, with small sounds of comfort, someone cracking his knuckles, another sighing softly, a cat stretching on the floorboards. There is beauty in their stillness. For once, no one rushes to work. They simply exist, alive in the fragile space between chaos and calm. A British chronicler once wrote that sailors cherished these rare mornings after storms because the ship seemed to breathe forgiveness. The phrase stays with you as you look around the cabin. Every plank glows faintly in the light. Every hammock sways with soft rhythm. It does feel like forgiveness earned through fear, sealed by silence. The captain appears at the doorway, his face pale but composed. He surveys the room for a moment before speaking. "She's holding," he says quietly, meaning the ship. "We'll mend what's broken." The men nod, simple and sure. Repair will begin soon, and life will move forward, as it always does. You watch as they rise, one by one, shaking off the heaviness of sleep. Tools are gathered, ropes checked, wounds wrapped tighter. A few laugh quietly, the sound tentative but growing. It spreads like the return of sunlight, hesitant and warm. One sailor pulls out a battered fiddle and runs his fingers along the strings. The notes that emerge are thin but bright, like morning birdsong. Others hum along, their voices blending with the creak of the ship. The air feels lighter with each sound. A fragment from a ship's log captures this exact mood. When the storm ends, we sing not for joy, but to remind the sea that we remember her mercy. You feel that now, deep in your chest. The song is soft but alive, carrying gratitude into the still air. The warmth builds slowly as the day brightens. You step closer to the window and watch the horizon. The world looks endless again, the same vast expanse that both cursed and carried them. The sea has forgiven, at least for now. You lie back once more, the hammock rocking gently. The smell of salt feels cleaner, the air less cruel. Around you the pirates move with quiet purpose, their fear washed away but not forgotten. Sleep returns easily this time, soft and clear. The sound of the waves is no longer threatening. It is steady, rhythmic, alive. You close your eyes and breathe in the peace that follows survival. For a moment, you understand what it meant for them to find rest here. Not the absence of danger, but the presence of grace. The next night arrives with a calm so deep it feels unreal. The wind has vanished, the sea lies still, and the air carries a soft glow from the moon that floats low over the horizon. You open your eyes slowly, and for the first time, there is no sound of strain in the wood, no whip of rope, no rattle of loose chains, only quiet, the kind of quiet that hums. You sit up in your hammock and look around. The cabin glows faintly from a single lantern left burning near the center beam. The men are asleep, their faces peaceful in the dim light. Frost has formed a delicate web across the window, and the air is cold enough that you can see your breath. Yet somehow it feels gentle now, not cruel. The storm and the fear have passed. What remains is stillness. On ships like these, such nights were sacred. A note from an 18th century sailor's diary says that after the coldest storms, when the air went silent, the crew called it the sea's sleeping hour. They would whisper, move softly, and avoid even striking flint for light. The ocean dreams now, one line reads, and to disturb her is to wake her hunger. You listen to the rhythm of the men's breathing. It is slow, steady, and perfectly in sync with the soft rocking of the ship. The sound blends with the faint murmur of the water outside. It feels like the entire vessel has fallen into the same heartbeat. Somewhere in the shadows, the cat purrs, curling near a lantern's warmth. The quartermaster lies motionless, his hands folded over his chest as if in prayer. The captain, sleeping near the door, still wears his boots. Even in peace, the habit of readiness never leaves. Yet tonight, their sleep feels different, deeper, more certain. Pirates often spoke of rare nights when the sea went silent, and they could hear the faint crack of ice on distant waves. Those moments, historians believe, were the closest thing they had to serenity. The danger never vanished, but their minds quieted, soothed by exhaustion and the rhythm of survival. You shift in your hammock, the fabric creaking softly beneath you. The air is cold enough to sting your fingers, but your body feels warm from within. Your muscles ache, yet the ache is almost pleasant. It is the ache of endurance. A scholar once wrote that sailors learned to fall asleep anywhere because their minds had to be stronger than the weather. The same thought applies here. These pirates, surrounded by frost and fear, had trained their bodies to rest even in uncertainty. It is a kind of wisdom few on land ever learn, to close one's eyes not because the world is safe, but because it must be faced again tomorrow. You glance toward the ceiling. The frost there glitters like stars. The moonlight slips through a narrow gap in the beams, painting thin silver lines across the walls. The ship sways almost imperceptibly, enough to remind you that it is alive. The motion becomes a lullaby, an old familiar rhythm that tugs at your consciousness. Above deck, everything is still. The sails hang loose, frozen at their edges, and the ropes sway gently in the breeze. The sound of ice shifting on the water is faint, like glass sliding against glass. Even the sea seems to be breathing slowly now. In another time, A poet who traveled with sailors described the ocean as a mother who punishes and forgives in equal measure. You understand it now. The punishment has passed, and forgiveness has arrived in the form of this still night. The pirates dream quietly. Some smile in their sleep, others mutter faintly, lost in memories of sunlit shores or long-forgotten voices. Perhaps they dream of warm sand, of a tavern's laughter, of music and firelight. Or perhaps they dream of nothing at all, just the endless dark that rocks them without judgment. A sailor's log from the early 1700s mentions that in the coldest months, men often dreamed of warmth so vividly that they woke sweating. The body, he wrote, remembers the sun even when it has forgotten its name. You think of that now, the strange resilience of the human heart. Even surrounded by ice, it finds a way to burn. The ship creaks again, softer this time, like a whisper of satisfaction. The sound blends with the sigh of the sea and the murmur of sleeping men. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm take you. The cold presses against your skin but no longer feels hostile. It is just another presence here, as much a part of life as the ropes, the sails, the salt. You breathe deeply and imagine the sea from above, a dark mirror stretching to infinity, dotted with frozen foam and the faint glimmer of stars. Somewhere in that expanse drifts this small wooden ship, carrying its fragile cargo of dreams. For a long moment, you think about how they managed it, these men who found sleep in a world that refused comfort. It wasn't strength alone that kept them alive. It was faith. Faith in rhythm, in one another, in the ship that cradled them through the coldest nights. You pull the blanket tighter, your body heavy with warmth and fatigue. The sea hums softly beneath you. The lantern flickers once, then steadies. Outside, the moon begins to set, sinking toward the horizon. The water reflects it perfectly, so that for a heartbeat, it looks as though the world has two moons, one in the sky and one sleeping in the sea. You watch until your eyes grow heavy, until the sounds fade into quiet. You think of all that has passed. Storms, songs, silence, warmth, fear, laughter, and the strange peace that comes only to those who have survived both darkness and cold. Your breathing slows. The ship sways once more. The frost glimmers faintly as if listening. And finally, you drift away into the same deep, steady sleep that carried those pirates through their longest nights, safe for now in the arms of the sea. The ship grows smaller in your mind now. The sound of waves softens until it is nothing more than a faint rhythm somewhere deep inside you. The frost fades. The lantern's glow dims to gold, then grey, then to the gentle dark behind your eyelids. You breathe slower, deeper, the way the pirates must have after long nights of cold and work. The sea, once endless and merciless, becomes calm. Its voice quiets to a whisper. It is no longer an enemy or a trial. It is a blanket that stretches in every direction, soft and wide, holding the ship and you inside its steady cradle. You can still feel the rhythm of motion beneath your body, that rocking that comes from centuries of sleep on water. Let it carry you. Let it slow your heartbeat until it matches the sound of the tide. Somewhere far away, the men who once lived this story rest in silence. Their hammocks have stopped swaying. Their tools have rusted. Their ship has long since returned to the depths it loved so much. But their dreams remain. Every night like this, in every quiet room, the sea remembers them. Breathe in the salt. Feel the warmth that hides beneath the cold. Let your thoughts drift like smoke across the horizon. You are no longer watching them, you are with them, carried on the same current, rocked by the same rhythm. The sea sleeps now, and so do you. The world outside fades until all that remains is stillness and breath. You are warm, safe, and floating. The storm is over. The journey is done. Sweet dreams.